Good evening. Calling to order the CUSD Board of Education meeting for January 16th, 2025. Welcome, everyone. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Trustee Zhao.
Here.
Trustee Chow.
Here.
Trustee Leong.
Here.
Trustee Manhattan.
Here.
Trustee Liu.
Here. All right, thank you. All right, item 1.2, board agenda approval. Could I get a motion, please?
I'll move.
Thanks, Sylvia. And a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Satish. Roll call, please.
Trustee Zhao.
Aye.
Trustee Chow.
Aye.
Trustee Leong.
Aye.
Trustee Manhattan.
Aye.
Trustee Liu.
Aye. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so moving on to item 2.1, board study session. So who shall I turn this over to?
I'll kick it off and
Thank
just, as we've been over the last couple of months, we're trying to add on some of these separate study sessions, which just give us a little bit more opportunity time to dive in and spend a little bit more time. So we are excited to bring back information about Cooper Doodle. If you remember, we shared at the board advance last spring. There were some questions. And so we did want to bring back some further information on that. Again, this is just for information to kind of digest. The one thing that I did want to share is that when we originally were bringing in Cooper Doodle, we thought we were going to have a little bit more information from the governor as far as what the budget is. And so we were going to also share some of our budget assumptions going forward. Christine and I will be attending the governor's webinar study session next week. So we will have some additional information. So we won't be sharing some of the budget assumptions tonight, but we will have that for next Thursday's board advance as well. So tonight we'll really just focus on Cooper Doodle. It will show some of the financials as Cooper Doodle as well. We have our special guest, Michelle Herridge, who oversees the Cooper Doodle. Tina Burnell will be joining in, I believe, if we have some questions, and Chris. So I'm going to turn it over to the three of them. And I think we're going to kick off with Michelle.
Hello, good evening to the board and to everyone else, Executive Cabinet. I'm happy to be here this evening to share a little bit more about Cooper Doodle since the last time I was here. What we're going to do tonight is I'll walk you through a little bit of the history of Cooper Doodle, and then we'll also look into the forecast too next year. So we'll start off by next slide. We'll look at the board resolution. So back in March of 2018, a few months before I arrived, there was a board resolution regarding the Cooper Doodle preschool program, as well at that time as a after-school care program that were under enterprise programs. Some of the items that came up on this board resolution were focusing on nurturing the social emotional development of children, cognitive, physical development, building self-confidence, extending learning experiences and opportunities for student success. And one of the things pointed out in here as well is that quality preschools are a sound educational investment. And they have demonstrated a significant long-term prevention of need for things like special education services and student retention. So those were highlighted in that board resolution at that time. Well, I guess I'll say one more thing. I kind of hopped ahead a little bit. One other thing to point out that was pointed out in that board resolution was that children who attend preschool perform better on standardized tests in math and reading, which is wonderful. What a great service to children. And they exhibit more positive classroom behaviors and also are more likely to graduate high school and continue their further education. So that's a little bit more about that on the board resolution there. So where are we now? So Cooper Doodle started in August of 2018, and it started small. But where we are now is we have currently this year 2 sites, Meyerholtz and Montclair, a total of 6 classrooms. At the Meyerholtz campus, 3 of the 4 classrooms are Mandarin bilingual. 1 class is in English. We have full day, which is a 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. program schedule option. We have an academic day option, which is 8 o'clock a.m. to 4 p.m. and a half day option, which is 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock p.m., a 4-hour program. You can see on the slide that the numbers are very heavy in the full day program at this campus. That's what most of our families tend to choose. We have much lower numbers in our academic and half day, only being 3 students that participate in that schedule. We also have 7 staff members who have their children attend here at Meyerholtz, 2 in the Mandarin and 5 in the English class. All of those families are staff families are out of district families who also do attend the preschool. We have 15 staff here at Meyerholtz. At the Montclair campus, we have 2 options. Enrollment was low this year at Montclair, so one of the strategies we used was to build in a Mandarin enrichment program. So it's not the same as the Mandarin bilingual program, but it adds an enrichment component in the afternoon for an hour to 2 hours that families can opt into as part of their regular day. And that did prove to be very popular with our families there. And so quite a few of our children do participate in that enrichment piece at Montclair. As I said, the enrollment, we have low enrollment right now. We do have a few more kids coming on. We'll talk more about Montclair in a few minutes, but that's where we are now. And there are 4 staff at that site. We also do have, besides myself, we have Alice Chan, who's back here as our supervisor, and we have a secretary. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So originally, as the district had adopted the resolution, and then there was a preschool advisory committee that was setting some goals for the program and what the hopes were for the preschool at that time. The goals here were to provide that high quality environment for young learners, ages 3 to 5. To really also create, at that time, inclusion opportunities for children in our YCC program to, combine with our program, which we did on a regular basis, a daily basis, while the preschool program was on the Muir campus. But we did have YCC programs all next door to each other in that string of portables back there. So we were definitely able to accomplish that. Additionally, it was one of the goals was to be a fee-based tuition at a competitive market rate. So to this day, yearly, as we set tuition around November, we look around to see what is, what are the preschools in our area looking like as far as tuition and that sort of thing go. Another goal was to pay staff above market rate salaries. And then the financial goal was to have an ending fund balance of $1,000 per class without the indirect costs or facility charges charged back to the program at that initial stage. So those were the initial goals there. So here's our timeline of kind of how it went from day 1 back in August of 2018 up until today. So one of the things that I'll say is when you start up a preschool program, you don't just walk in and parents come to your door. There's a lot of trust that has to be built between families and a preschool environment. They're dropping off their little babies with you, and they really want to make sure they're in a safe setting. A lot of the feedback I got from parents at that time as they were enrolling was that they trusted the district. And they said, I'm bringing my children here because I trust CUSD, and I believe that they would only implement a quality program with highly qualified staff. That was one of the considerations when it came to job description and hiring as well, was to make sure that not only were we meeting the licensing requirements, but that we really held that to a high standard to make sure our staff were very well trained in early childhood and had experience. So that's reflected in our job descriptions. So the first year, we opened at Muir. We had 2 classrooms next door to each other. And we had 2 teachers, an instructional assistant, and 21 students and myself. So it was off we go, off the ground running, and really started building at that point. So we started building the relationships with families. The next year, we expanded in the 1920 school year to add a classroom over at Montclair. So now we added additional staff to be at Montclair. Well, who knew that in the end of the 2020 or 1920 school year, we would encounter COVID? Nobody knew that. That was a circumstance, just a life circumstance that we had to accommodate with. And we also sheltered in place. The next school year, we came back in the 2021 school year and were the only program that had students attending during that full entire school year. We were able to match very well the number of staff who were choosing to work at that time with the number of students, whose many of them were families who were first responders or had other jobs in that area. And it matched fairly well with to make ratios work. So during that year, we also had some restrictions about how many people could be in a room together. And so there were, I believe, no more than 14 people could be in any room. So that left staff and 12 students in each room. So we expanded to 6 classrooms so that we could break our 24 limit per class into 2 rooms. So it allows us 12 in each room. So we had 4 rooms at Montclair, 4 Muir and 2 at the Montclair. That allowed an enrollment that year of, let's see, that would be basically 3 classes worth. The following year, we could expand that to fully fill 24 students per classroom in all 6 rooms, which we were able to do as we move forward. So in the summer of, 2023, we had some shifts in our schools where we had some of our campuses closed and some shifts were made. So the program was moved from Muir over here to Meyerholtz and has been here since that time. So the one other benefit of coming to this site is that 2 of the classrooms on the Muir campus were the smaller portable buildings, modular buildings. And here the rooms were all the size where you could fit the full 24. At Muir, they were a little bit smaller. And so this year, here we were had all 6 rooms going. So that's just a history, kind of the timeline of how the ebb and flow of the program, what that looked like. So alongside of that, if you kind of think of what happened along the way, and later in the presentation, Chris and Ortina are going to really get into more of the specific financial budgetary pieces with you, but I'd like to go ahead and walk you through some of the things that impacted the overall with the preschool, some of those factors. So in the 2021-22 school year, the indirect costs were backdated to the original first year of implementation, so the 2018. So you'll see eventually in a few minutes, and you saw it in the spring presentation as well, there's a $192,000 backdate to that. So you'll see that on there. In March 2022, we did start having some of those salary increases at that time, and you'll see the percentages here on this spreadsheet of 7% and 6%. 22-23, we were able to, with the tuition and registration fees and all of that with the program, we were able to have a ending fund balance of $697,259. So the program produced that, and then at that point, we were able to take what the program produced and pay back any contributions that had been taken earlier in prior years and return that back to the general fund. So you'll see a remaining balance of $100,000 on that year, but the program itself earned $697,000 that year. We also had another salary increase in July. 2023-24 was the medical contributions for employees for starting January 1st. And then in 24-25, this school year, we again had a 3% and then 2% salary increase. And the reason that this is on here and for your information is when we set tuition for the preschool, we set it around November into December of the prior year. So for that next August. When we're using market rate and we're using what we currently have, we're considering, you know, what increase should there be each year? Should there be, if so, what is the percentage? Many of the salary increases and the medical don't necessarily happen in the same time frame where we can adjust tuition to accommodate for that increase. And so we are kind of going back and the next year to say, okay, what was there and how can we make sure that we're keeping up with these other costs that are there. And so this year we'll go ahead and well, we'll stick with that. So I just wanted you to make sure that you had those numbers and knew when things happen, and also to understand how that impacts the overall ending fund balance each year for the program based on the timing of those types of things. On the next slide, you'll see some other key factors when it comes to budget. One is that we've been, as a district, able to offer our staff some benefits and to return back to our staff as well. So it's ebbed and flowed what percentage of a discount our staff get. It is currently at 25%. It has been at different percentages over time, 15, 30. It's a 25 now. It's kind of bounced around a little bit. But that is something that right now, if you were looking at the budget sheet, it would show also in some of our, it would not show as revenue because we have discounted that as compared to if another child who wasn't a staff member had that same spot would be paying more money for that same seat. Some of the other things that we offer our staff that do impact the program's budget is that we do provide for all of our staff care for the first 3 days before the first day of school so that our staff can attend all staff meetings and be ready to go here at work as well. So we hire extra help during that time to make sure the preschool staff can also participate in any meetings or trainings or anything of that sort during that time period. Also on our learning days and minimum days. So we do hire extra staff that is expensed to the program for those things to be able to help our CUSD staff be able to not worry about care for their children during that time. They also, of course, have priority registration. As we start off each year, they aren't required to pay a deposit up front so that they don't have to come with up with the money up front. They just make their payments as usual throughout the year. So this year, for an example, we have taken that 25% discount was about $38,000. And so basically you can look at it as being reinvested back into our staff. The other factor with some of our budget was the move from Muir to Meyerholt. So there's relicensing, setting up rooms, making sure plumbing's right. You know, the little ones have all the little tiny facilities, right? They need the little toilets and the sinks and all of those types of things. So we did those kinds of things, made sure there was some shade out on the playground for them to be able to play. So that was something that happened. And then on year 4, we added in the indirect costs. And so we talked about that already. As you know, we also have our TK program. And when we talk about Montclair and the numbers being a little bit low, the Montclair campus had quite a few children that happened to be on the older side when they exited. So, you know, in a preschool, you have ingoing and outgoing all the time. They're only there for a couple of years. Well, we happened to have a large outgoing class that year. At the same time, the preschool age or the TK age was getting a little bit lower. And so, you know, it has had an impact on the program overall. So our average age is getting a little bit lower in the preschool. So we've been, I've been working with just different people in the early childhood arena and looking to see what things we can do to accommodate for that age shift and moving forward so that we can still bring in children. And while our olders, and by older, I mean 4, are going off into TK. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go to the next steps here. So next step. So next year, our Montclair program will be consolidating all over to the Meyerholtz campus. And 2 factors. One is we have increased enrollment because of TK. And we need spaces. We need spaces with restrooms and, enough space for kids to move about, playgrounds, all of those types of considerations. That's one reason. The second one is really efficiency of the program as it's undergoing a shift. So as we're shifting and adjusting to this TK, it's a good time to consolidate, build our momentum to continue moving forward in a positive direction. We did implement a 10% tuition increase this year to cover some of those costs that we talked about in those earlier slides. So we had the benefit of knowing that to be able to accommodate for those increases, not just with that, but also overall with the increases in prices with food, materials, and that sort of thing that we all experience personally as well. We are currently in the process. We start our registration process for returning families as they're exiting in December for their winter break and continues into January. And then for our new families, that starts right when they come back in January. And we start notifying families mid-January of their acceptance, which is a typical time range for preschools to be able to start planning for August and for families to know what their care options are. As of yesterday, we have 127 fully submitted applications and 170 applications that are in progress. So that means the parents have touched it, have filled out some piece of it, but haven't completed it. It could be they're waiting for an attachment, or it could be they've just opened the document. So not all of those people will complete an application, but that's how many are in the system at that point. So we've talked a lot about numbers and the program, but I did want to touch on some of the other pieces that I talked about with that board resolution. And also with our district's, sense of belonging priority and really what that means for parents and families. So you'll see on here, I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So the first quote is an email from a parent, and her child, she was looking for a preschool. She's a district parent. They live in our neighborhood school boundaries. And her child she was looking for a placement and was unable to place her child in some other private preschools. They weren't accepting her child in. We have a process to observe children to make sure that we can accommodate all their needs. And we were able to do so. And one of the wonderful things that I can tell you is that this child was able to go into a general education setting when she moved out of the preschool. So that year helped her to gain the skills that she needed to transition into gen ed rather than into a special education setting. The second one is just a really heartfelt message from one of our families who also happens to be a CUSD staff member. So she was just expressing gratitude towards the program and, of course, our amazing preschool staff. So I wanted you to just have a little bit of a taste of what our families send to me pretty regularly through email. That's the end of my slides that I have to share with you. One thing that I didn't do yet, I was supposed to bring it up with me, so I'm going to do it now before we get too far along the way, is the children work so hard on these pictures for you. And so they're so wonderful, and I just wanted to make sure that there's something inside the bag for you. But
Thank you.
And as Michelle is handing those out in Chris's getting ready to present, I do, Michelle touched on it, but I really did want to emphasize when we implemented back in 2018, 2019, and there were some goals, aspirations for the implementation of, and at that time, we certainly didn't know COVID was coming, and we didn't even know that the universal TK was coming in for full implementation. So when we think back, when we set our targets back in 2019, there were some things that slightly disrailed our projections there. And so getting back, we've recovered from COVID, we're implementing TK, we have a better sense what those numbers are. I think that's helped us refocus. And that is, again, I think one of the benefits of relocating the Cooperdoodle. It's now here on one site. It's a wonderful setup for the young 3-year-olds. And so, there are some opportunities now that we could continue to expand here as well. So just wanted to share that because I know Michelle touched on it, but, things happen that are completely out of our control and were completely unknown at the time. So I'm sure that good.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And I want to thank Michelle. And Michelle did all the hard work as far as my part. I'm just going to read off some numbers. So Michelle stole my thunder, but it's okay. Anyway, I just want to kind of go over some numbers as you heard Michelle talk about. She did take you through that year by year look at what was going on in the program, what were some of the implications that were going on. And then obviously what you see here is really what those look like in terms of numbers, actual numbers. So as you recall, I shared this graph with you before. We go back to day one, 2018-19 school year. At that point in time, at the infancy stage here, we were generating, that year we generated a total revenue of about $368,000, short of $369,000. But because of the early stages, the program was not self-sufficient. Our expenses that year exceeded what we were able to generate revenue-wise, and so it required then the district to provide a contribution or a supplementation to the budget to have a balanced budget that year. And so in 18-19, the general fund provided about $95,000 to help support the Cooperdoodle program to get us off the ground. And at the end of 2018-19, we showed that we had a zero balance and we were ready to start the next year. So the following year, as we were getting closer to moving into COVID here, our program still was getting off the ground. We only generated that year $627,000 of revenue, yet our expenses were over $1 million that year. So that required us to provide, again, a contribution from the district's general fund to the tune of about $486,000. So at the end of that year, everything was fine. We had a zero balance. We went forward and then we hit COVID. So COVID, the revenues that year in 2021 were $631,000. We didn't have a very large contribution because I think that year, because our expenses were a lot less, we were able to minimize the contribution that year to just $14,600. So the first 3 years, I guess technically speaking, we ended the year with a zero balance, and each year we started with an even starting point. We got to 21-22. Total revenues that year was $1.24 million. Our total expenditures were about $2.4 million. So pretty close. It's pretty much a balanced budget. And as Michelle mentioned, that was the first year that there was this indirect cost charge, the $192,000 on there. I do want to point out that when you go back to the prior 3 years, the reasons why we didn't charge any indirect costs, and probably the reasons why there wasn't any facility costs at that time, was either way, those would have all just further increased that contribution for the general fund. So we would have been taking money and paying ourselves back. It probably just didn't make sense at the time. And today I know our situation is a little bit better. So with that saying, is that we ended the year 22-23 with total revenue at $2.3 million. Our expenditures were $1.9 million, and we ended the year with a surplus of $439,400. So I would say that's our first best year as far as turning a profit. But yet we did know that we were still needing to recognize the $596,000 that the district's general fund contributed to get the program up and going off the ground. So when we got to the 23-24 school year, when I look at that column there, we started the year with that $439,000 ending fund balance. We took in that year $2.6 million in revenue. We spent $2.96 million in expenditures, but out of that $2.96 million, $596,000 that year came out of the program to help restore the district's general fund. So for all intents and purposes, the Cooper Doodle program paid back the general fund those initial contributions from the general fund. But as you will notice here, I'll talk a few minutes of that, we're still at a point where we're barely above break even. We're at this point in time not taking into account any facility charges. And so we're kind of moving forward now into the current year. So for the current year, where we are right now is we're estimating to end the year with about $2.4 million in revenue, spending about $2.45 million in expenditures, and ending the year with a positive balance of about $48,000. And obviously today is January. We still have 4 more months in the year. This number is going to change. So when we close the books, this could be more, but I don't suspect it to be less. So that's kind of the recap of today. But I think my other role here is to kind of talk about next year. And as Michelle alluded to, we're building a budget for next year based off of some assumptions. And so if we go to the next slide. So what I'm showing you here basically are 5 separate scenarios. The differences between the scenarios are, in the first column, it's based on only having as little as 72 kids enrolled in the program. The next column is based on having 84 kids enrolled in the program. So you get the sense that each column here represents a few more students. And so when you go to the far right-hand side, we think that the program could enroll, and I think this is based off of licensing and based upon the square footage that we have, we could enroll as many as 120 kids. So imagine that we're looking at 5 scenarios based upon the number of kids. It's going to have a deciding factor in terms of how we end each year. So I'll go to the far right-hand side again. If we were to enroll as many as 120 kids, we would be generating approximately $2.9 million in revenue. Our expenditures based off staffing and also including facility costs. So we have now built in the facility costs, the equivalent to, I guess, rent 6 classrooms at $3.75 a square foot. That amount specifically on the room rental is $352,000. So when you go back to, again, what we're assuming, if we enroll the most amount of kids, 120, will be positive, meaning a net surplus of about $500,000. And that's over and above indirect costs. That's over and above the $352,000 for the room. So best case scenario, $500,000 in the positive. If we don't enroll as many as 120 kids, and if say we only enroll 72 kids, as you can see here, revenue-wise, we'd be only generating about $1.7 million in revenues. Our expenditures will be about $2 million still, and that's factoring in the 6 classrooms, and that would leave us with a negative ending fund balance of about $270,000. So I had staff look at this and say, okay, where's the break-even point? So break-even point is somewhere closer to 96 kids. So that's kind of what we're suggesting that we bring forward, some budget assumptions. And then obviously this will all kind of depend upon how the enrollment
Yeah, and if I could just add on that, so for the current footprint that we have here at Meyerholtz, although we only have 4 classes here, and as we're shifting to Montclair over here, we have the capacity to have 5 classrooms here without expanding the space that we're already using. And so we already have the facility set up there. So to expand to that 120 students, the classroom is already incorporated into our current footprint. So there'd be no change here to the Meyerholtz.
We'll entertain any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Michelle, Chris. It's a very informative presentation. We'll maybe go to the board here for questions. Who would like to go first?
I can.
Okay. Satish.
Okay, thank you, Michelle and Chris. It's great, actually, good information and kind of like at least we are not getting a consolidated information about this, and this is pretty good, actually. Thank you for that. And a couple of questions. So now, why this assumption we made like a 72 to 122? Because we have already 127 full application and 170 in progress. Is the trend like that every year you would have a lot of applications and they truly do not get enrolled, or what is it? Can you explain that why it is so?
The 72. I defer to Chris.
Well, as Michelle mentioned, that there are some other factors that we are trying to anticipate for this coming year. With the full implementation of TK, there is the prospects that we might have fewer kids enroll because this is the same age group as our TK students. So from a budgetary standpoint, we were just kind of looking at where the range would be based off of the most amount of students we think we could have and potentially have as little as 72. It's not that I'm saying that we're not going to have the 96 students. We're just showing is that if we only take in as many as 72 students, this is what it would look like.
Okay. And Satish, are you referencing more on the slide where we're saying there's so many applications and that, so on the slide application or the application slide where there's a certain number of full and then there's these,
Okay.
is that a typical year that we
So-
get that amount?
Yeah, so typically what happens on the Meyerholtz campus is that our current capacity with 4 rooms is 96. As Stacy mentioned, we do have one of the rooms that could be converted to build a 5th room, which gets to the 120. Currently, when we do enrollment at Meyerholtz, it's full with the wait list. Even as transitional kindergarten has been rolling out year by year, we still are full. Some of the children that don't enroll, because not everybody does enroll. Sometimes children, the families are signed up and they change their mind for whatever reason. Right early on, we just quickly go to the wait list and we backfill those positions. So from my perception, based on past history and past practice by the parents, we do fill here. We fill at this campus. It's located in a space where it's easier for families to get to. There are other nearby schools where those children who live in those neighborhoods can easily get to this site. So the 72, I think, was just a way to go back and say, well, what if it were to go low? But as you saw, the numbers right now are at 127. As of yesterday, we do keep getting new applications each day. I didn't try to update the numbers in just a single day's time, but I wouldn't anticipate a 72.
Yeah, so my concern is it that we are probably the bottleneck is us, like kind of we are limiting the capacity then. If we want to make 120, we can have as many kids as because we have in the pipeline and wait list. Why are we not looking into that? So because now 127, let's say, sorry for taking a little bit time on this. So 127, we have full application and 170 going. So let's say hypothetically, even 50 more comes in, we are roughly about 175 full applications. So our capacity is limiting. And we are going with this kind of, when we are finding the bottom line, the capacity is what it is determining. But we do have demand, looks like. but we don't have space or we don't have the facility to support that. Any thought on that?
So one of the benefits when we moved it over to Meyerholtz is the possibility of expanding. So right now, when we say the 6 classrooms, 6 classroom spaces that we're utilizing, that's what we initially established. So if we had an extensive number of applications, out of the 127, I don't know how many of those will actually transpire into coming here, if we truly have that amount, or will we have 150? But that is one of the benefits of having it all located at one site. I do think we have the ability, if we chose to expand here, we have the facilities, that would be a choice for us. So there isn't, I don't think there's that closed door that says we have to cap it at that amount.
We would be able to recruit staff and do the necessary things, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's good then.
I think if we reflect back in 2018, 19, when most of us weren't part of this conversation, even, the strategy or the thought at that time was to grow all the way to about 360 students, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. So there was that intent that we would continue to grow. And again, I think with the implementation of universal TK, that's probably not quite as realistic, but we also hear there is a lot of need for the care.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone who'd like to go next? Sylvia?
Thanks, Michelle, for the presentation. It's really great to see the history and all the things that you guys have been able to do. I wanted to go to that slide with the goal, the initial goal of making it about 100K. Let's see, slide 4. Original targets for ending fund balance was about 100K per class.
Can we
So-
change the slide up on the screen to slide 4? Sorry.
And so it's good to kind of get the budget breakdown where it is, but can you tell me what that actually, how far away are we from that 100K per class
So
right
as you
now?
saw that last slide, based
Yeah.
off of 120 students, we could be getting about $500,000. So that's the equivalent of 5 classrooms at $100,000. So we walk and find maybe it's 5 classrooms, so we're very close to that regional area.
And that's with the addition of facility costs and indirect costs, which were not a part of the assumptions at the beginning of the planning. So at the beginning of the planning, those weren't factored in, but now even though we want to factor those in, we're still able to get to those targets.
So maybe I'm a little confused because I thought that we're based on that, on the slide 10, it didn't seem like we were anywhere near the 100K per classroom. So can you help me understand what if it's like, if we're getting like,
At the end of 25-26.
no, like currently,
Oh, current year, no, not the current year, no.
yeah,
So for the current year, if today was the end of the current year, we would be ending the year with a balance of about $48,000. Nowhere near
yeah,
$100,000 per classroom. And in this case, there is no set asides for the facility cost. So
right,
the main difference is that in the 25-26 budget assumptions, we're assuming that tuition is going to be increasing by 10%. So that's where a large percentage of it's going. Sorry.
So this year we're nowhere near it, but by 25-26, are you saying if we get to 120 kids, we could easily be at that within a turnaround?
Assuming assuming that we have 120 kids and then all the other assumptions, the new tuition rate,
Uh-huh.
and there aren't any other costs to labor. I mean, right now it's based off of the current salaries for the position. So if there's a salary
Right.
increase, that's not built into that at this point.
So that 352,000 is factored into that as well. So the 352,000 facility costs plus the above and beyond of those, the numbers that are on the next slide.
Oh.
Okay, but if we aren't at 100, and if we're kind of holding steady at like, what are we this year? We're like closer to 90-ish this year.
We're at 94 here at this site
this
and
site.
90.
we still. have
Yeah, this
Montclair
site we're at
operating.
96, which is at capacity.
Okay,
The other, so the Montclair site, so this year, part of what caused such a low ending fund balance was the lower enrollment at Montclair.
okay,
And when you combine a program into one site, the efficiency is going to go up quite a bit.
right,
Is because the way the preschools work, our preschool program, it's not a school day where you would start and the same person that starts the day ends the day. They're different, you have an opening and a closing. So in order to staff that for a single site,
Mhm.
it works well when it was full. It worked very well and produced well. So by consolidating and bringing that over here, it brings the efficiency back into the program, which is why you can see those numbers go up so much.
I see.
In addition to that 10% increase to accommodate for some of those past increases in expenses.
Okay,
So
Okay.
between the current classrooms at Montclair and here, we have about 113 students currently enrolled.
Thank you.
okay.
So fairly close to that
Oh,
120.
And all indication that it would probably stay about the same.
Yes.
I think based on the applications that we've
Yes.
received, it's very consistent with the last
Mhm.
couple of years.
And
Yeah.
then given that the age range is lowering and we're getting more, I would assume 3-year-olds
Mhm.
versus 4-year-olds, does the ratio, does the staffing cost go up because of the lower age or? does
No,
the
it
staffing
doesn't with our
ratio stay?
current license. We have, our license runs from 2.9 all the way through the age of 5.
Okay.
And so we're able to accept children at 2.9 years of age and older. And so that won't affect our ratio at all.
But essentially, once TK goes full implementation, preschool is pretty much just servicing 3-year-olds. It's just like a one age, like
Yes and no. So yes, and the idea that 4-year-olds do have the ability to register into TK. One thing to note is that this coming school year, the 25-26, is the last year of age implementation for TK. So the parents that are enrolling today that are part of that 127 are already the parents that have the option. So those are already the parents that have children that could be going to either TK or to preschool. And parents make different choices based on their family circumstances. So some prefer a smaller environment of a preschool setting than an elementary school. And some prefer the elementary school and to get started early on at that site. So the numbers you see now are based on that full last year of implementation of TK.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, would like to go?
Yes,
Long?
yeah, I have some questions. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's great. And yeah, I have some questions. And so for Cupertino teachers, do they need to have a certificate? Like,
So the way they can qualify to teach is by having a certificate through the CTC, the Teaching Commission. They also can qualify by way of early childhood education units.
Mhm.
And so we have a combination right now of teachers who have permits that are issued by the state, as well as transcripts showing an equivalency through their schooling. And all of our employees, from our preschool aides to, we have 3 categories. We have our preschool aides, our teachers, and our lead teachers. And all job positions require some education to be able to be in those positions in early childhood.
okay. And so are they CEA and the CSEA members, just like other
Yes.
employees?
Mhm, they are all CSEA members.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
okay. So even for the teachers, they are also CSEA.
Yes, it's interesting when you go into preschool because
Yeah.
they are classified staff, but the only classified staff that are also teachers. So it's an interesting, it's a little bit of a difference as opposed to being a certificated teacher. It's a classified teacher. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay, and So I'm considering to comparing our Coop-a-Doodle with other sides of preschools. So, yeah, I guess other sides of preschools, they pay rents, most of them probably. And we do not pay rent, right? And so, but we pay for the have some set aside for facility costs.
Yeah, we have not charged the facility cost in the year past. That would be built into the assumption into the outgoing year. So next year there
Okay.
would be the facility cost of, I don't have the slide up in front of me, but I think it's about 350,000
Yes.
that is embedded into it. So if we were to lease that out to another organization, that would probably be the amount of facility lease revenue that we would generate. We're charging them as if they were an outside enterprise versus part of CUSD. So it will be the first year that we're fully charging the indirect and the facility, and then still projecting to make that profit.
Okay, cool. And yeah, for the tuition, are we charging less than outside or more than?
No, so as far as preschools in the area,
Mhm.
we do take a look around to see what are other preschools charging that have a similar type program. You know, we aren't comparing ourselves to, say, family home daycares. We're comparing ourselves to other childcare who serve in a similar type capacity. So we are within that range of what's out there in the community right now.
Okay, so it's comparable.
We do it comparable every year.
I think the one benefit, when Cooper-Doodle was first put in was really as we were working with our union organizations is what is some way that we could help this to benefit our employees. And that is where the discount and Michelle is right. It's been up to, I believe, as far high as a 30% discount down to a 15%. We're at 25% discount right now. We don't have a large number of staff that take advantage of it, but I know for the 9 or 10 that are, it's important because it does cover all of those work days when they're coming back for the staff development. And so it really is an employee perk for their, I think the amount of the discount generating about $38,000 difference in revenue, that's offset by an employee perk that's important to our
And
employees.
one thing to point out that I don't think we've mentioned yet tonight is that the preschool also runs separately during the summer. So during the summer months, the families sign up for extra weeks. So this is added revenue as to this is the academic year that we're presenting to you today. We also run anywhere from 7 to 8, depending on the length of the summer and how it falls from the end of school to the start of school. And children and families are able to sign up by the week. And we generate a positive income stream during the summer as well.
And I have a last question, say for slide number 6. We have some, say, a salary increase and the benefits coming. And so I guess is that on par with CSEA salary increase and the benefits?
Yes, so the employees under the Cooper-Doodle are CUSD employees, so any salary increases or health and benefits apply to them as well. They're part of the
Okay, I see.
CSEA membership.
So it's nothing special.
Not unique
Okay,
to
okay.
Cooper-Doodle or isolated to Cooper-Doodle. It is for all employees. That's
Okay, I
your-
see. Okay.
Good question.
All right, thanks. Ava, do you have anything?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for presenting and thank you, Chris, for presenting. See, I really appreciate first question Satish had, because that was the same question I had, so that's one less down. In regards going with Satish's question, if we have 5 classrooms and we end up having a demand, is there any additional cost if we were to increase it to 6 classes and have more than 120, or are we at it where the trend in the cost, everything, we actually are going to be earning more money? Or is there any cost because you said that the capacity is 5 classrooms currently right now, and if there is a demand for it and we end up having, and to accommodate the parent and community demand of having 6 classes, what would be the cost for that?
So it's like a startup cost for a new classroom.
Yes.
What might that entail? So
Yeah.
what that would entail is, just some additional materials, furniture, things like that, and some licensing fees. That would be the main main expense. There may be, like we talked about earlier, the small toilets, we may have to add in a small toilet to replace a larger toilet. But those are the main startup fees when you already are on a campus and you're just adding in a room. So we would redo our license to add in one more classroom and pay the fees that you have now, 6 student rooms versus 5 student rooms.
And there would probably be a staffing increase as well to accommodate that 6 classrooms. So
Mhm.
I think what we would do in that case, if we were looking at expanding, we'd want to examine and weigh the costs is, what it would be the increase in the staffing and the facilities. Does it offset the revenue that we generate by expanding to that additional 24? And that would be a decision we would have to make to stay in the positive.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and to add to that, being that all on one campus, again, we were talking about that efficiency. When you are on one campus with staffing, it's easier to be efficient with shifting as needs come up, just like in a school site. When somebody's absent, you can support each other when you're on one site.
I did just want to do a quick time check. It is 5:55, so just,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, thanks. Please.
I think the other question is, we can move on. The other ones I can ask later on.
It's okay, go ahead. So-
I was wondering about the indirect outgo costs that, whether it's on slide 10 or slide 11, this might be a question for either Chris or you, Michelle, like, what would those costs be? Are those the electricity or?
Sorry. So indirect costs are the cost of doing business. All of our programs in one way or another get charged in indirect costs. It goes to cover overhead, district overhead, all the employees that we have to hire, all the employees that we have to pay. It goes to covering other incidental operating costs. So that's what the indirect cost is, and it's a percentage of the expenditures for the year. And that percentage varies from year to year, and it's tied to the district's approved indirect cost rate. So all of our programs get charged in an indirect cost rate.
Okay, so as their expenditures increase, the
Increase.
percentage increases.
Well, the percentage is set. It's just the amount will increase as expenditures go.
Right. Okay. That was all the questions I had.
All right,
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Ava. Just for me, 2 quick ones, really understanding demand. We can let them know they can come in. I think I see a bunch of students out there. It's cold out there. So you talked about we have a wait list this year at Meyerholtz. Is it primarily Mandarin language or English, or is it a mix? Just off the top of your head, what's your impression? Do you think there's leaning one way or the other?
I would say just based on the percentage of rooms of Mandarin as compared to English, it's
Mhm.
3 to 1,
Mhm.
that you have more on the Mandarin waitlist just because they're, of the program. But it is in both. We do get a wait list in both.
Right. And do you have a sense that the folks that enroll in this, is there a lot of interest in our CLIP program or not necessarily? Do you?
Some of our families do move on to CLIP. Yeah, some do,
Okay, all
some
right,
don't.
all right, well,
But there is an interest, yes.
okay, all right. Well,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah.
We're coming up on 6 o'clock, so this will come back as a discussion later.
So we'll be able to continue this discussion next week at our board advance, because one of the topics will be Meyerholtz, and we do need to talk about the space, and we have an opportunity then as we talk about budget assumptions as well. And maybe just to add, as that last message there, through the years and again through some of the obstacles that we've worked through, projecting ahead to next year would really be that next year that we would generate revenue. And what that means to us is that revenue could come back into the general funds and begin to use to support other programs. And so, that's that optimism out there. It's no longer working in isolation. It actually does benefit more than just Cooperdoodle. It benefits the district as a whole, which was the original intent.
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Okay, so we'll pick this up next week.
Yes. Thank you.
All right,
Michelle.
then if there's anything else, then we'll wrap up the study session 2.1 and move on to, let's see, it's about 2 minutes. Maybe I'll take a quick 2-minute break. It's 2-minute break. We'll continue at 6, just 2 minutes. Okay, thanks. Convene our open session here. So first item on the agenda, 3.1 flag salute. I believe we have Alice Tia from Kennedy here to So please come up to the podium and please lead us in the flag salute.
Everybody, please stand up. Place your right hand over your heart. Remove your hats. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alice. Next item, we have a school presentation from Kennedy Middle School. So
I'd like to ask the executive cabinet. Thank you. I'd like to ask the board and the executive cabinet and any members of the community who would like to join us to come up and form a circle. We will be doing a community circle this evening. And we will talk about the reason for doing that after we have had this lovely experience that our students are going to run for us tonight.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Get up and go. And what I say is true about you, you'll get up, is in the middle of the circle, and then we'll move to a different spot.
I didn't hear you. Go back to the same spot.
Move to a different spot.
Okay.
Get up and go if you traveled over winter break.
Next, please get up and go if it is your first year with the Cupertino Union School District.
Next, please get up and go if you have visited the CUSD campus this school year.
Oh, no.
Finally, please get up and go if you've not yet gotten up and gone. Wonderful.
Now we're going to say clap, 1, 2, 3. And we'll all clap at one time at the same time. Clap, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may please be seated. Students, if you will stand over there, and we will be coming up to talk a little bit about community circles and our initiatives here in the Cupertino Union School District and Kennedy Middle School. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, Superintendent Yao, executive cabinet, and of course, members of the community, thank you so much for spending your time here with us this evening. You might wonder why we are doing community circles at Kennedy Middle School. We began an initiative last year in which 75% of our certificated staff and 100% of our special education staff, both classified and certificated, did receive training to do restorative circles in our classrooms and in our campuses. We're very excited about this initiative. And this year it has been going so well that we decided to go ahead and include student voice in this initiative so that our students can take more of an active leadership role in our community restorative circles. So these are a group of 6 students that you see before you. There are a group of 25 who spent their own time coming to train on Wednesday mornings and a couple of full days that we actually had off days. They came to train. They spent many, many hours at school, and now they will train in the classrooms and at staff meetings. We have had a circle at every staff meeting run by students. It's been a wonderful experience for our staff as well. They do support in the classroom when asked to. You might ask why restorative circles? There are many, many reasons that some of them you see here on the board. One of our initiatives obviously is a sense of belonging in our school district. Community circles are a wonderful way of creating a sense of belonging and getting to know our peers, our teachers, our staff, and one another in a different way than we would in just a normal classroom setting. These students have been so instrumental in moving this forward. And now that we are incorporating portrait of a learner competencies, we also can relate those competencies to the work that we're doing with our community circles. It's been a wonderful journey. PBIS, it all folds in together. So we're very, very excited to present to you this evening some of the reasons that we are doing community circles. And we really want you to understand how important we think it is. Our students are going to come up and introduce themselves, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves, their competencies, and then we will take questions for the evening. I'm going to introduce Sana Manoj.
How do I change it to the? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Hi, my name is Sana Manoj, and I joined the Restorative Circles group because I think it's really important to get to know our peers really well, and also because I feel Restorative Circles helps make more friends. I think Restorative Circles has had a positive impact at Kennedy because circles let students express their ideas clearly and use active listening skills. This relates to my competency because when students are free to express their ideas, it creates a more open environment for the students, and by actively listening, they get to hear other students' perspectives and what they think. Also, I feel a very important skill that helps students a lot in the future is being able to communicate your ideas really clearly to others, and Restorative Circles definitely helps with that. Thank you for your time, and let's move on to Darshini Karthik.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you, Sana. Hi, my name is Darshini Karthik, and I'm an eighth grader at Kennedy. I joined the Restorative Circles group because I wanted a space where I could come up with my own ideas and share them with others who are just as passionate as I am about learning and making Kennedy feel like a safe space. Restorative circles positively impact our school by allowing those both who are part of the circle and those leading the circle to express their creativity, whether it is by coming up with questions for the Get Up and Goes or coming up with answers to questions that we ask on the spot. My competency, Inspired Creator, is very much a part of this because it is all about demonstrating creativity, drawing from a variety of sources, and asking vital questions to help us reach a final goal. This is very, very important to being part of the Restorative Circles group because we are encouraged to not only share our own ideas, but also be open to those of others. Thank you for your time. And now, Sohei Bang.
Hello, my name is Sohei Bang, and I joined the Restorative Circles group because I wish for other students who are also passionate about learning and taking values an opportunity to share their opinion with others and work towards development. I believe that Restorative Circles can positively impact the school environment at Kennedy because it fuels deeper conversations and allows students to learn and form their own voices to speak out about environmental and social issues that are located throughout the world. Being a global contributor, my competency relates to this due to how it highlights how we should seek out the truth behind a variety of viewpoints and fosters the behavior of putting oneself into other people's shoes. In addition, global contributors help students to become more confident, to take a stance to make our world a more supportive, loving, and beautiful place for all. Thank you, and now Ikarna.
Thank you, Sohei. I don't think my slide is.
Yeah, I did.
So it's missing.
I think my.
Okay, you're right. What's in there? Do you want to use your phone? Since it's not on mine. I'm sorry, I sent you one recent.
Because my slide was deleted during the fire. I can present without my slide. That's necessary.
That one I can give her a computer to read.
Oh, yeah. All right, I can present without my slide. That is. Thank you, Sohei. Hello, everyone. My name is Akarna, and I'm a student here at Kennedy Middle School.
I am pleased to be part of the Restorative Circles group. I joined this group in order to aid sixth graders with their abilities to analyze, question, and synthesize with their peers and in class. This program connects and ties together with students outside of their normal comfort. I truly believe that this program can positively impact the school, as fellow students and classmates can develop their sense of community. This can bring students together and fuel their senses of belonging. As a critical thinker, I see how students are able to bring light to their options and challenges. I strive to change how students view their challenges and feelings of exclusion. Instead, students can take a more positive route and navigate difficult challenges and socially moving issues. Thank you, and let's move on to Alice Tai.
Good evening, everyone. I am Alice Tai, and I joined the Restorative Circles because I wanted to have the opportunity to help facilitate something that helps improve relationships and make sure that everyone is heard. Something that's special about me actually relates a bit to the objective of Restorative Circles. I guess I can say that I am empathetic since I choose to understand other people's perspectives. Understand how they feel. I think the Restorative Circles contributes to the overall positive climate of Kennedy because it includes others and helps everyone feel part of our community, so nobody feels left out. The inclusive collaborator, which is my competency, relates to Restorative Circles as it meets the main objective of including others and showing empathy. Not only that, but being an inclusive collaborator makes sure that there is plenty of communication, a characteristic of Restorative Circles. Thank you. And now let's move on to Wesley Chow.
Hi, my name is Wesley Chow, and I joined the Restorative Circles group because I thought it would be a great experience for me to better get along with my brothers, peers, and school as a whole. I think Restorative Circles have had a positive impact at Kennedy because it allows students to face challenges they either were not confident or scared to do as a group. These activities help students gain skills to later overcome these challenges. My competency is resilient learner, and it relates to this as competency resilient learner emphasizes the importance of students' growth mindset. Not worrying about failure, but understanding that failure is part of the process of learning. Thank you. Thanks for the attention. Now, Mr. Guzman.
Thank you, Wesley. Good evening, Superintendent Yao. Good evening, Board and Executive Cabinet. Ironically, I'm going to talk about wellness, and my voice is not 100%. Please bear with me. Wellness at KMS comes in many shapes and forms, with the goal and outcome that every student has the opportunity to be a complete student, not only academically, but mentally, physically, and socially. As you heard from our students, Restorative Circles have helped them in many capacities and competencies to build relationships and address and resolve issues. Teachers at KMS have used Restorative Circles to build rapport with their students and with student peers, and discuss issues around the community and the world. In PBIS, Restorative Circles are one of many tools available to staff and students. Another tool is the matrix and the discipline flowchart. The PBIS team at Kennedy and the staff have given their feedback on a more robust discipline flowchart and matrix to help with Restorative Circles and restorative practices and give students the tools to be able to resolve their issues and their behavior and negative behaviors. KMS has over 30 student interest clubs that they themselves have created and asked teachers to be the advisors. These clubs vary from chess club, financial literacy club, debate club, multilingual club, sticker club, volleyball, and basketball club to a rock and roll club where students play instruments in a band, including the drums and all. And I gotta say, they're very good. Students in leadership class provide board and table games such as football, foosball for the student body on Tuesdays and Fridays during lunch. They also plan spirit weeks and class competitions like dodgeball, in which the teachers competed against the winning class this week. Sorry to say that the teachers won. We also have a program called Web, Everyone Belongs, where everyone belongs, where 8th grade students and the teacher advisors plan activities and orientation for the incoming 6th graders. This gives the 6th graders an opportunity to ease into middle school. And then we have the Zen Den, a community room open to students daily when they need a quiet space during lunch. In all, we continue to work and provide students with resources and opportunities to be a complete student. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening this evening. I'd like to open it up at this time if the board or the executive cabinet or the members of our audience have any questions they would like to ask either Mr. Guzman, myself, or more importantly, our special guests, our students this evening. Please feel free to ask.
All right, at this point, I'll open the floor up to my colleagues. Anybody like to share anything or have any questions? Or
Yeah, I have a question. So did the teachers team win all the time or just happened to win last time? Okay.
Anybody want to address that? I think that Mr. Guzman, before he got his cold, was actually the deciding factor in our crushing defeat. I didn't play, sorry. I will be in the dance off. It's a good question.
anything else? If not, please go ahead.
So first of all, thank you for sharing all your thoughts about the restorative circle. And also, I'm really interested in knowing, how did you know what your characteristic is, the resilient learner or the inclusive collaborator? Did you go through some sort of I don't know, diagnostic to determine that that's your category?
We were given the option when we first were introduced to this idea and presented at the board meeting, presenting about one of the 7 competencies. And we were asked.
Why don't you all come on up and you can just take turns.
So we were given the opportunity to present at this board meeting, and when we did so, when we took the opportunity, Dr. DeWeese asked us to present about one of the 7 competencies, and we were asked to choose any that we thought resonated with us or we thought that is very important at Kennedy. And for example, I chose the creative one because I like to think of myself as someone who is creative and expressive.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. Thank you for providing an interactive opportunity and also learning about restorative circles. How often do you all usually do restorative circles, like in a given month or week?
Usually students are chosen on Wednesdays during staff meetings. Dr. DeWeese sends out emails to the chosen students. Also, we are sometimes taken out of class to do it with 6th grade classes. Everyone gets to do it at least a week at a time.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No, sorry, usually this is a meeting board, but yeah, so.
They can do public comments, right?
You could do public comments later, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have another question about the game. Okay. Yeah, for the rule. So every time you when you need to come to the center and then come to a different place. But yeah, for one question, I was say whether you are first year to the CUSD districts, and yeah, I was I'm in a new. This year I'm in a new role, so I was wondering whether I should come to the forward. Yeah, but then I realized, okay, I will be the only one came to the center. Then I cannot come back to my original place, then am I stuck there? Or that didn't work. Okay.
I think the question, like if you were like one of like the first, if you it's like your first year at the district, I think it's fine to just go into the middle and like go back to your original place. Just like show that it was your first year at the Cupertino Union District.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I do have a question. I don't know if you guys know what we do here. But one of the things we do is we decide how to spend the money in the district. So there's one thing you like the board to think about, what can we do for Kennedy? What would be, if you could pick one thing for us to do for Kennedy, what would it be? Yeah, feel free to speak. Doesn't have to be a group voice. But go ahead, Wesley.
Thank you. But as someone who plays in a multitude of sports, I do feel like the gym could use a little bit of help.
Noted. All right, thank you. Thank you, Wesley. Anybody else want to make a wish? No? For Connor?
I really appreciate our science students and classes. There's a lot of very dedicated teachers in our school to science, and the materials there aren't honestly at the best of quality, and there isn't a lot for everyone. A lot of the time we either have to share or split them, especially in my class. So I would appreciate if, especially the science and in general, most of the classrooms get a few more utilities.
Excellent. All right, science supplies. Thank you. Okay. All right, anybody else? Oh, Alice, okay.
Well, there's like a major issue in our school, which is trash. I don't know if you guys have to like spend any money like to reduce trash, but like there might be like some system like buying more trash cans, but like that just like, yeah.
Okay, all right, we'll put that on the list. All right, okay. Well, if there's anything, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, picture. So we're gonna take a picture all together to commemorate this event. So if we can line up here, we'll let these presentations are always the best part of the meeting. So we'll go back to work now. Let's see, what do we have? Item 3.3, this is to recognize the classified employee of the month. So Mike?
So at this time, our classified employee of the month is ill and not able to join us, nor is the site administrator. So I would like to postpone the presentation, and we would do two presentations in February so that the employee has an opportunity to be here.
Sounds great.
I always like to have people here when we're talking about it.
Of course. All right. Sounds good. Okay, then moving on then to item 4, employee organizations. Do we have any speakers today, Aaron?
Yes, we do. We have CEA President Kate Lee.
All right. Welcome, Kate.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Yao, our executive cabinet, our CUSD teachers, and our CUSD community. It's hard to believe that we are halfway through our school year, but here we are. With so much still ahead of us this year, I'd like to give a short update on a few things that have been happening and going well in our district. Today, our 3 union presidents met with Allison Lanier and Mike Gelber for a presentation and discussion on the updated new LCAP plan. The state requires all districts to meet with stakeholders, including employee organizations and associated parent groups as they're preparing the LCAP. There will be a full presentation by Ed Services on the LCAP tonight, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details on it. But I do want to extend our appreciation and acknowledgement to Allison and her department for their work on LCAP. I particularly want to acknowledge their dedication to all of our uncounted population of students, that each and every one of them is identified and valued. This student population has really increased over the past few years, and our Ed Services department and other departments as well, I would say student nutrition is a part of that as well, have worked hard to ensure these students have the supports, interventions, access, and sense of belonging in our district that every child deserves. This was not always the case when our district focused mostly on the high achievements of the majority of our student population. I remember going to meetings back then and asking, but what about our Hispanic students or our socially disadvantaged or our ELs? They are staying stuck in categories of low academics, absences, and suspensions. What are we doing to help them and help them achieve their success that they can? How can we support them and change their outcomes? Well, I don't have to ask these questions anymore. With Allison's leadership and the dedication of her and her staff to each and every one of our CUSD students, and particularly those students who are part of our uncounted populations under LCAP. So big thanks to all of you. Much appreciated. Our teachers are looking forward to the start of the inclusivity work group that begins at the end of this month and will continue through the school year. We look forward to working together with the district to define and address our students and teachers and our district's concerns and needs in this area. In addition, I'd like to thank Superintendent Yao and Allison again for providing teachers the opportunity to discuss and give input on the administrative regulations for the newly adopted Board Policy 6144 on controversial issues. That meeting took place last week, I think it was. And I've heard from a few teachers who were a part of that meeting. They told me it was a very productive, positive meeting. The teachers invited were a diverse range of grades, sites, and years of experience, and also probably the subjects that they taught. The environment was very collaborative and cooperative. Our teachers felt heard and respected and when bringing up their concerns and examples of what we encountered in our classrooms these days. And to make sure those are being considered as the administrative regulations are being finalized and then will be presented as complete. So we are very much appreciative of that opportunity provided and the open listening and respect that was afforded to our teachers. The district plans to have our CUSD parent leaders have input on that on the AR 6144 next. This type of collaboration with all of the different parts of our community, our different stakeholders is such a great way to ensure our policies and priorities meet the needs of our students, our teachers, and our parents and greater community, and therefore can be successfully implemented and over a long period of time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kate. Thanks for coming to share your thoughts with us. All right, then moving on, next item, public comments. So this is a standing agenda item for the board to receive public comments on matters not listed on the agenda but are under board's jurisdiction. Do we have any speakers tonight?
No, we do not.
Okay, great, thanks. And then in that case, then we'll move on to item 6.1, superintendent's report.
Thank you. So we are into January, and January is always that interesting month where we are halfway through the year and still focusing on completing the year, but we're also really looking ahead to the following year. So we are waiting to hear information from the governor on what the budget will look like. Some of the preliminary reports are a more positive outlook for school funding, which is always encouraging. But we also know that that changes very quickly. And so we are hesitantly optimistic. A couple of us will be traveling to Sacramento next week to hear more about the budget and gather more details and see what the effects will be on public schools. So we'll continue to monitor that as well. Then the other change into January is as of that January 1, new laws often come into effect. And so we are doing a look at those new laws, anything that we may need to adjust and modify. We do know that Title IX has just gone through kind of a major change. And so we're vetting out what that impact means to the school district as they say vacate the current Title IX, but reverting back to 2020. So we'll be bringing all of that information to the board as well as we move forward. And so it's just a fun time of the year because we're halfway through, but we're also starting to plan ahead, and that always brings excitement as well. We have our State of the District coming up in February, which is just an opportunity for us to share with all of our partners in our communities kind of those highlights of what CUSD is. It's our one opportunity where we really get to tell our story and highlight all the great things that we're doing, but also to give a kind of a forecast of where we're headed as a district as well. So more information on that to come as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on to section 7. We have 5 information items tonight. First one is 7.1 Enrollment Task Force Update.
Thank you. So I'd like to invite Leslie Maines up to the podium. She does facilitate the enrollment task force. And full disclaimer, I was attending CSBA at the last enrollment task force. So she held the meeting solo. And as we are committed to, we always want to bring updates back to the board, where we're going, what we've worked on, and then to get some input onto the board if there's something they would like us to take back to the committee as well. We do have our next meeting on next Tuesday evening. So quick turnaround from feedback from tonight to prepare for Tuesday. So I'll turn it over to Leslie.
Okay, great. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see all of you and welcome Long Jiao. He was on our task force the first 2 years. So it's nice to see you here. Just restating the purpose again, and we revisit this each time we hold our meetings, but you've seen this multiple times. What we did at this last meeting, when we left our first meeting, they had some information that they felt that they needed in order to be able to discuss balancing enrollment at the middle schools. So they asked for some enrollment updates. So we reviewed middle school numbers. We didn't put the numbers in the slides because you've seen them already. We talked about open enrollment numbers at middle schools. They were curious about what those patterns were, and then also private school exit and enter data. So what we've included today in the slides are things that have not been presented to you. It's new data that Kristen was able to pull for us. So in regards to middle school open enrollment for the 24-25 school year, they had open enrollment available for Clip at Miller, Hyde, Kennedy, Lawson, and McAuliffe for the middle school programs, CMS based on the size, and Miller neighborhood program based on the size. We did not open up open enrollment at those school sites. When that happens, when open enrollment happens, the staff looks at where there is opening based on staffing and numbers of students in classes, and they were able to pull kids into different programs. Some kids went to Miller, some went to Hyde, Kennedy, Lawson, and McAuliffe. Hyde and McAuliffe requests are now exhausted, so there is no longer any open enrollment wait list at either of those schools. I'll show you what the numbers look like at the remaining schools. And then finally, remember that the first task force, when they presented to you, we had our living wait list. This is the last year where some of those families may be remaining on the wait list because they have been grandfathered in. And so when you look at these open enrollment wait list numbers, remember, some have been waiting 1 year. Some have probably been waiting 2, and some possibly open enrolled at 6th grade, never got in and are still waiting as 8th graders. As you move into the following school year, everyone will reapply on an annual basis. So it would be really clean data. So looking at the waitlist data, the name of the school is at the top. So if we look at Kennedy first, then we look across, there are 11 Cupertino Middle School students in 8th grade on the wait list for Kennedy, 11 in 7th grade from Cupertino, and 9 in 6th grade. We know that those 9 are new requests. We're not 100% sure we could pull that data. I don't think it's that useful really, but we're not sure out of those 7th and 8th graders, have they been on the list 1 year, 2 years, or if they're in 8th grade, 3 years. Then we look at how many kids are on the living wait list for Kennedy from Hyde. Obviously, Kennedy is nulled out. How many students from Lawson are requesting through open enrollment to go to Kennedy? How many from Miller? And then how many from private schools? And so let me explain how that works. A student can register to go to Cupertino schools. They can open enroll to go to any school that is open for open enrollment. And then they can decide, well, I didn't get into Kennedy, let's say, as a 6th grader. That's where I wanted to go. So I'm just going to wait in private school until my opening becomes available. And so we're not sure where they are in private school. We know that they are in private school and they chose not to go to their neighborhood school. So then shifting down, we've got our Lawson wait list. So how many students from Cupertino Middle School have open enrolled for Lawson? And these are kids that are still waiting, not students that have already been allowed in. How many from Hyde? There are no students from Kennedy that have open enrolled to go to Lawson, then our Miller and our private school. And then the CLIP program, the alternative program at Miller, there are Cupertino students that are waiting, Hyde students that are waiting, Kennedy, Lawson. There are some Miller students that are waiting on open enrollment to get into the CLIP program, and also some private school students. Remember, for the alternative program of CLIP at the middle school, there is a language competency as well. And based on how large the school is, they don't really have the ability to continue growing the CLIP program. So they fill the spaces with usually with sixth graders and then through attrition. So it is less likely that a seventh or eighth grade student would get in. They would typically get in at that sixth grade year if their lottery number was a favorable one. Okay. So then the group wanted to know a little bit more about private school data. And so, what the task force continues to ask is, well, this can't, all the kids that are going to private, how many are there that live in the Cupertino Union School District? We only know if they enroll with us and then they tell us that they're going to private school. They could tell us they're moving to another city, but they really aren't moving to another city. They're going to private school. So we only have the information that is given to us through our enrollment process or through our exiting process. They look at the census data and say, well, there just seems to be a disconnect based on what the census is saying about how many students should be in this area compared to how many Cupertino has. But this is the good information that we have. So for Kennedy open enrollment, when we looked at the kids from private school that were open enrolling to Kennedy, if they had come to their neighborhood school, there would be one eighth grader from Cupertino, one from Hyde, one from Lawson. Because they didn't get into Kennedy through open enrollment, they're waiting in private. Seventh grade, Cupertino, one student, Hyde, two students, 5 students at Lawson. If they get into Kennedy, maybe they'll take that spot. Otherwise, they're choosing to wait in private school. And then sixth grade, 2 from Cupertino, 1 from Hyde, and 3 from Lawson. Shifting down to Lawson, these are students that want to go to Lawson, but there wasn't space through open enrollment at Lawson. They didn't want to go. They chose not to go to their neighborhood school. In this case, it's Cupertino, Hyde, and then for sixth grade, 1 student at Kennedy. And then for the CLIP open enrollment, the Miller open enrollment CLIP, we've got for eighth grade, 2 students would be placed in Cupertino, but instead they're waiting at private. 2 students are Hyde residents, but they're waiting in private, and 1 is a Kennedy resident and they're waiting in private. There's no seventh graders. And then the sixth grade, there are 2 that would attend Cupertino, 2 for Hyde and 1 for Lawson. Okay. Another question they had, well, tell us about these CLIP students. Where do they come from? And I think we've talked to you about this on an annual basis when we've given enrollment reports. They're from all over the district. We've got, if you look at this graph, there's a lot of students, obviously, that are Miller neighborhood students that are attending the CLIP program. And then Kennedy, Hyde, and Cupertino numbers are pretty high. Hyde, I think they were interested in the Hyde numbers and how large those were. And so that's the data in regards to the school composition at Miller for the CLIP students. Okay. Then they were curious about McAuliffe. They noticed that the McAuliffe middle school numbers are small. And so they were curious about, even with those small numbers, where would those students attend if they had not had a McAuliffe choice? And so if they didn't choose to open enroll somewhere else, this is where they would fall. We've got a handful at Cupertino, 14 at Hyde. You can do the math. Not enough students that really would make a tremendous impact coming or going in either direction. What we notice historically is that, at that fifth grade year, McCullough families make decisions. And usually more than half of them do choose to go back to their neighborhood middle school. As to why they make those choices, we haven't surveyed them. We don't have that data. I think people would have anecdotal stories of what they think, and I think it varies. Okay. So then another question they had was, what do we know about the students that come to Cupertino and then they leave to go to private school? So what happens in the student assignment office now, it used to happen across the school sites, but in the student assignment office is when a family is to call them before we do a CalPADS rollover, which happens sometime during the summer. They get a code and they tell you, why are they leaving? We're moving to California public school. We're moving to a private school. We're moving US. We're moving out of the US. And it's basically done either on the phone or through an email, but they tell us the reasons why they're leaving. And it's a pretty basic conversation. We don't ask more details. What private school are you going to, or what state are you moving to in, outside of California? We need it for a coding purpose. So 180 is the code that we put in when a family says to us, well, we're moving to private school. We don't know if they're moving to private school in California. We don't know if they're residing where they're currently residing. We don't know if they're moving out of country, but that's the information that we have. The numbers here are smaller than what really happens, though. In the summer, when CalPADS rolls over, and I don't ever really understand the coding purposes, but when the beginning of the school year starts for a new school year and a child doesn't show up, we call to find out, well, where are they? Because we worry about them. And at that point in time, that 180 code is no longer used. And there is a code, a standard code that is used for all students that are just choosing not to come there. So we don't track them in the same way. And I think there's reasons why that happens. I can't explain them, but if you had questions about that, I'm sure Mahmoud can help us out. So that data shows those are families who actually actively told us we're moving to private school. Okay. The other question they had was, well, I think tons of kids leave at the end of fifth grade and they exit and they go to private school. Again, we only know what they tell us, but based on the data that we've collected, it's not a huge number of students based on our enrollment in fifth grade, rolling up to sixth grade, that are actually leaving and stating, again, what they're stating is what, that's all we can do, but the stating that they are going to a private school institution. And so those are our 180 codes. Those are the families that tell us between the end of the school year and before we do our CalPADS rollover and the new year starts. And then they were curious about, well, how many come back to us? Are they leaving in fifth grade and coming back for middle school? And it really is sort of all over the board, but we have more students coming back to us in sixth grade that are stating that they're leaving us in fifth grade, which is exciting. It's exciting to see the numbers. We sort of wondered, the group wondered, whether or not the numbers increased and will continue to increase based on the changes that are taking place in our middle school programming and ensuring that students have multiple electives. So that's their hypothetical thought. Okay. So what happened after we shared this data, we had collected from them some ideas that they had brainstormed in regards to what are some possible ways that maybe we could balance enrollment. And let's see what we think, and then we can start modeling some of these things that seem doable, seem reasonable, etc. They've not started the modeling process. All they've done is the ranking process. So they came up with, I think there's 7 things that they felt could be worthy of exploration. These things were submitted by individuals, members of the group. Out of these 7 things, they were broken up into table groups and they discussed and asked questions of each other to sort of see what do we really think is reasonable. And then they were asked to put priority rankings, which were the 3 that they really felt to begin with, we as a group should start discussing and seeing, is it even reasonable? And so the 3 that they felt as a collective group from this list only that were possible areas to explore would be, would it be valuable to look at an alternative school program or a magnet school program at a smaller middle school? Would that be something that the district would be interested in? Would that be something that the parent community would be interested in? And they haven't started massaging what that would look like, but that was one idea that collectively the groups favored. So it got 3, I think it got 3 out of 5 votes. There were 5 tables. 5th grade exit interview was something else that they were curious about. So families that are leaving the district in 5th grade and going somewhere else, not even just to private, but to get some more information from families if they would do that interview, is why are you leaving? What's compelling you to go somewhere else? And if it is a private school around the corner, what is that private school? What are those private schools offering that we aren't able to offer or that's interesting to you? And then they felt that we should explore after school programming at middle schools, which from what I understand from Stacy is already in the works. So we posted those. They ranked and voted on them prior to leaving the last meeting. So one of the things that we will do on Tuesday is dig into these a little bit more as a group. And then the other thing that they were asked to do as table groups, because not everyone had submitted an idea, they were asked to see, are there any other ideas? Out of these 7, those are great ideas. Are there any other things that you as a table group can collectively think about that should be proposed as a discussion item? And so they posted them, but we ran out of time, which we sort of always do. And so we will need to come back and allow table groups to explain what they posted and what they mean by it. And then we'll need to go through some sort of a process to determine how viable does the collective group believe those are for exploration. And that is it.
All right.
And so I think one of, in sharing this too, as we look at the slide 12, and these are their ideas to explore, certainly if there's any feedback from the board, are there items, one of these 7 that you have a priority for, or would like us to take back and say to the group that, the board would really like to see if you're interested in exploring this a little bit more. They identified their top 3, but obviously all 7 of those were of interest of them. And so if any of that resonates with you as well, we can take that feedback to the committee as well on Tuesday.
Okay, great, thanks. Open it up to the board. So maybe we'll do a round of questions and then we'll have comments after that. So would like to go?
Okay, like same order.
Same order? Okay,
Yeah,
actually,
okay.
that was.
Yeah, I think
okay, all right.
they're pretty good, a lot of data. Only this private schools, right? So I know it's a little bit of gray area. So they apply and they wait. They're on the wait list. I'm talking slide 5, for example, just for our talk. Okay, here. So let's say 6 kids are applied in the private school for Kennedy, and this is the beginning of the or June timeframe, right? Whenever you August timeframe. This data.
Correct. That means they're still sitting on the wait list. Well, they're still sitting on the wait list now. They applied sometime in the spring. I think they're doing it currently. Correct? Are they doing open? When's open enrollment? It's, I think open enrollment.
But the wait list data is currently living wait list.
But open enrollment for middle school, when do we open up the open enrollment for middle school? That's done in the spring.
It's currently occurring for the
So
school.
what's the priority for private school students? Because see, at least all other students are in our district. Okay.
There's no private. So the private school students live in the Cupertino School District boundaries. So they have a right to go to.
So they have a neighborhood school in our district. They are a resident there within our attendance areas. They have a neighborhood school that they could attend. If they're on the wait list from private school, that means they don't want to go to their neighborhood school. They want to go to one of our other schools.
They only want to go to a different school.
Okay.
So-
And as and when their number comes, you contact them, right?
We do. And when we look at the wait list, so let's say all of a sudden we decided, well, we're going to add 5 students back to Kennedy. They've got space today.
Okay.
And we're going to move 5 kids over in 6th grade. If the first 5 kids were private school kids, they would be offered those spots. They have the ability to say, yes, I'm ready to start, or no, I pass, and then they're removed from the list. So, you know, their priority, they are put into the lottery as a resident of the Cupertino Union School District. They've enrolled with the Cupertino Union School District, but they decided to not attend and just wait on the wait list and attend an outside, a school other than Cupertino Union.
I think another piece of information to keep in mind as you're looking at a chart like this, because you may be saying, well, wait a minute, you know, at Kennedy at 7th grade, there are about 25 students that are waiting to enter in. Why don't you just enroll them into the class? We don't staff based on open enrollment. We staff based on our push through numbers, because we need to make sure that when we're staffing, it's financially efficient for us. And if we pull those students, we would be adding a teacher, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if we pull that many students from that site, we're decreasing a staff member from that opposing site. So we have to be balancing all the time. If we're going to pull and add students, where are we pulling that staff member from? Because there's going to be a cost.
Yeah.
Typically, when we pull from one site, there's not enough to reduce a staff member.
Right.
And yet if we add, we would have to add us. So it's always a balance on that. So on any of our levels, middle school or elementary, we don't staff based on open enrollment numbers.
Yeah, I'm
think
more
Erin had something.
interested on bringing in the private students, because other students are anyway within the district. In
Yes,
this case, for example, Lawson, we have 12 students in 7th grade. So pretty
did
much a
just-
half classroom.
I did just want a point of clarification. So in November of 2023, we did update our board policy. And so the final item of enrollment priority was any student currently attending a CUSD school.
Oh,
So-
They get the priority.
Correct.
oh, okay.
So on the wait list, if
Nice.
there are students who are currently attending CUSD,
So
and there's
that's-
5 openings and we go through and the first 3 are private school,
We'd
we would
skip them.
skip and offer
Okay.
to the currently attending CUSD students. And
And
that
I
was a
think
board
that's-
policy changed in November 2023.
So they
Yeah,
are running.
Okay, I will wait for my comments. Maybe.
Okay,
I
okay.
think I'm interested in seeing that how we can bring more kids into the district, right? Rather than keeping them in the private. I'll stop there.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Satish.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, Leslie. The just real quick, just for definition, when you say waitlists have been exhausted for Hyde and McAuliffe, what does that mean? It means that there is no waitlist, or all the kids have been taken off the waitlist? What does that exhausted?
It means that there weren't kids on it,
Okay,
or there were students that open enrolled to go to those schools, and they were able to be offered positions, all of them. So every student that was on open enrollment to get into McAuliffe got in for middle school.
got it. Okay, and same for Hyde.
Correct.
And then with the waitlist data for Kennedy, Lawson, and Clip at Miller, so CMS is missing, and then just Neighborhood Miller is missing. And is the reason for that also that it's their
Because
lists
we didn't allow them to apply for open enrollment at those 2 schools because of the size.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And that was one of the big changes that happened with this last year's round of open enrollment. From what I understand, the staff was really, really careful about looking at where do we actually have potential space? Because what we were doing in the past, we opened up every school, and we had never a plan to allow someone to go into Cupertino because it was too big, or into the Miller neighborhood. And so they really look at their numbers, they look at the space that they can see or project into and say, okay, based on this and based on how we're staffing, we will have some spaces at Kennedy, or we will have some spaces at Lawson, et cetera, et cetera.
What I'm seeing from the numbers, at least for the exiting, the kids, the students leaving at 6th or 5th grade, 6th grade, and the students coming in, there's actually, it looks like there's more kids we're gaining kids
Yep.
into the district at sixth grade,
Based,
right?
yeah,
Based on
this, yeah.
based on this.
Yep.
So I guess I'm curious, in the data that you've been collecting,
Right.
is there anything that you're seeing that is this an anomaly? Is this normal? Is this, like, is this just standard that like a lot of families are maybe doing private in the primary grades and then coming back?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think historically, we've seen our numbers that families do choose to come back at the beginning of the middle school. And then you would traditionally see the same at a ninth grade level. You'll see families returning from the private school. And some of this is I can't pull the data from it, but just in past experience, the exposure of a middle school when you have those opportunities for the electives and the extracurricular, co-curricular activities, they expand when you come back to your neighborhood middle schools versus sometimes our private schools are smaller and don't offer maybe the breadth that is in a public school. So I think that's just, my interpretation.
And maybe I'm not sure if this may be a comment, so stop me if it ends up being a comment. The slide 12 with the ideas to explore. I know that, so the McAuliffe Middle School numbers, which personally I'm very interested in, but I know that it wasn't one of the things that hit the top 3.
Correct.
So in your process, as you go forward in the enrollment committee, are you not going to be looking at the ones that are not bolded, or are you like?
Right. I think it would be hard to tackle all 7 of these at one time is really the thing. And so we wanted to, and these were submitted by individuals without a collective discussion. And so we wanted them to talk as a group and say which ones, and really it is, which ones should we begin with? Doesn't mean the other ones won't happen.
Okay.
But which ones should we begin with? And they also know that the board will be looking at these and they may say, out of these, we'd really like you to begin with the ones you wanted to begin with. And we want you to add something else because it's a priority to us.
Got it. Great. Thank
okay.
you.
Thanks. Along.
Okay. Yeah, I have several questions. Say for first of all, it's about the capacity issue. That's some just like Satish mentioned. That's some of them are private school and they are waiting on some middle schools, and so I'm wondering, say if they. If some students come from, say, Kennedy, and they live inside the Kennedy area, and they apply to Kennedy, do they have a priority to get in?
So if they live in the Kennedy boundary and they want to go to Kennedy, we will place them at Kennedy.
Okay.
So one of the things is we don't pack any of our schools other than our alternative programs. We don't at the middle school level, if a student shows up and it is their neighborhood school, they make room for them. And if that means they have to we've never really had to do any staff shifting based on that. It's always worked out. But they have the ability to always attend their neighborhood school.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So that means if those students, if they're more flexible and want to just get into a CUSD school, we have enough capacity to accommodate. So.
If it is someone that lives out of district, no.
No, I mean, inside.
In district, yes. Yeah. In district to their neighborhood middle school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like Sylvia asked to say, we have a Miller, non-clip Miller, and also CMS, Cupertino Middle. They do not have open enrollment. Is that because they already reached the full capacity?
So what they looked at, I believe, is they looked at the number of students that would be coming from 5th grade and rolling up to 6th grade that lived in that attendance area.
Yeah.
They looked at the number of teachers that they had. They looked at the number of students that they could have in the classroom based on contract. And they did not see enough wiggle room because what they didn't want to do is they didn't want to have to begin moving teachers between school sites And like Stacy said, they're already pretty big schools comparatively to the other three. And we don't other than our full alternative schools, we don't staff based on open enrollment numbers. Open enrollment numbers really fill in holes and gaps when we have sort of that flexibility.
Okay, cool. And yeah, I have another question about the clip. Okay, because yeah, I had assumed to say clip in the middle school are all coming from the clip in the elementary. So yeah, since this is not the case, and since it's a waiting list for clip from other middle schools, I'm wondering, do we have any qualification test? Because there's a language requirement, I believe, that to participate in the clip program. Do we take any qualification test for?
We
those
do.
students?
Actually, starting in first grade through eighth grade, they do a language test. I couldn't tell you what it's like, but they do a language test. In first grade through fifth grade, the results are given to the parent and there is a recommendation typically made. You know, based on your child's proficiency, they're really going to struggle in comparison to their peers based on their language level. But the parent could say, that's fine. I want him in a full immersion program or an immersion program. I'm going to put him into that program. So at elementary school, the language test gives the parents and the school data to determine whether or not it is the right fit. But if their lottery number has been picked and the parent wants to go there with no language, no Mandarin language, that's okay. At the middle school level, that is not the case. They do a language test because what's happening is, I believe it's history, social studies, and English, correct?
Or Mandarin.
And Mandarin. So their history, social studies, which is a core classroom, is taught only in Mandarin. And so the students do have to demonstrate a level of competency to be able to be admitted into the middle school program.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. And Ava?
Okay. Thank you for being here and thank you for working with our community. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the waitlist data slide number 5, I believe.
Okay.
For this one over here, and I thank Sylvia for asking the exhaustive question because I had that same thing as well. For slide 4, sorry. Slide 5, do we sorry, getting to my question. Why I've noticed that looking at Lawson, it looks like Lawson has a lot of demand coming in terms of like more numbers in a summation coming from 6th through 8th grade, Cupertino, Hyde, and even the number of students are wanting to come in from private. Why are there so many, why is Lawson in demand? I mean, is there anything that I'm not or aware of that Lawson has that the other middle schools do not have?
What I would tell you about the Cupertino reason is because of the proximity of the borders. So if you know the district well enough, if you think about Stockholmeyer Elementary School, which is the biggest one, and it is some of their boundary is much closer to Lawson than to Cupertino Middle School. And so it's crossing one major road versus crossing 2 major roads to get to Cupertino. So my guess would be is if you were to look at addresses of those Cupertino kids, my guess is they live on the Nimitz Stockholmeyer side of, they live closer to the Stockholmeyer School and Lawson Middle School. It's just a closer distance for the students. I believe Hyde and Lawson also share a boundary, so it could be boundary related, which is probably why Kennedy and Miller are so small. They're so much further away. And then the question would be, out of those private school kiddos at Lawson, where would they actually be sitting? And I believe that's on the next slide. Like, what is their neighborhood school? So if we were to look at Lawson, these are students currently attending private school, but wanting to go to Lawson through open enrollment. The numbers again are the same as what you're seeing with our neighborhood kids. There's Cupertino kids, there's 11 Cupertino kids who want to go to Lawson. My guess is they live closer to Lawson than they do to Cupertino Middle School. And there are 12 Hyde students that want to go to Lawson. And I think it has to do with neighboring school boundaries.
Okay. Thank you for answering that question. Going to my next slide 12 on ideas to explore balancing enrollment across middle schools. I guess maybe we don't know the answer yet, but why was CLIP program relocation an idea?
Because of the size of the Miller program, neighborhood program as it sits, with an additional group of students that were from CLIP, which are portable, because the CLIP part of that program is a portable program. It's an alternative school.
Yeah.
It started at Lawson, I believe. Did it start at Lawson?
Yeah.
It started at Lawson. It moved to Miller. Lawson got large. Miller was smaller. We were able to move it like you could, because the boundary for that alternative school is the entire district. So their
Right.
wondering was, as they posted that up there, was if we moved the CLIP program off the Miller campus, the X number of students, and put it on a smaller campus like a Hyde or a Kennedy, what would the impact of that be? What difference would that make?
Thank you for explaining that part.
The one thing I do want to mention, just for just knowledge of CLIP. I believe that Fremont Union High School District has a Mandarin program at Lynbrook, only at Lynbrook. No, at all of their middle schools? Okay. So I do know that there is some reciprocity students that are in the CLIP program through open enrollment in Cupertino can go into the Lynbrook program. But if they have it at all of their middle schools, it potentially may not have an impact. Does that make sense?
Thank you for taking the time to expand on. Oh, that would be it for my question. Sorry.
All right, thanks, Ava.
Mhm.
I maybe just one question. Most of my questions have been answered. By the way, good to see you again, Leslie, always.
See you.
So I'm curious about, so you were showing us the material that was presented to the committee back in the December meeting with the private, the movements and the private school, et cetera, et cetera. I presume that data around, sort of housing growth and enrollment trends and all that, the committee already had that information from the work on elementary schools?
They did, and then we shared the demographer reports, and then they're waiting for you to get the new demographer report so we can present it to them.
So this is really in addition to that, the
Yes.
sort of the cross transfer rates and private schools and all that. So,
Yes.
and they'll be considering those other ones also.
Yes.
They have that. Okay, just
Yep.
wanted to double
Yeah.
check.
Unfortunately, they will not get it this meeting. They will get it in their March meeting, which is okay.
All right, great. Thanks. So that's the question I have.
Okay.
So I like to go around for comments, but maybe just check real quick. Are there public comments on this one?
No, they're not.
We don't, they're not.
Is it okay? I ask one more question.
Of course.
So since so much of data or attention given for private school here, and we are saying no priority for private schools when you compare to the people in, what was the take, or what is the reason for getting into that details if that's a case? Because that is a little bit of conflicting if that's the case, right? So our approach in the priority list, in the wait list, it is not given for the private. So much of data we collected for private here, is it just for the awareness or anything more? What do the team feels?
We have not really discussed it. I think what we've heard from individuals in the group, we have some in our group actually that had their children in private school and they've come back to Cupertino. They are wondering what that draw is and why would a family choose to go to private and not remain with us. And so I think that's where that exit interview idea came up, is how do we get a little bit more information from families about why they make choices to go to a private school around the corner? What are we not offering that potentially is being offered somewhere else? The families that have come back from private school talk about sort of that dawn to dusk programming. And even though they're paying money for the private school, they can drop their kids off earlier and their kids can stay later. That seems to be the biggest theme that comes up. We have a couple individuals in the group that are really interested in the private school data. They think that is the data that we need to capture. And based on what we're seeing, the numbers aren't tremendously huge, but I think we could benefit from information from families that either are coming back to us from private as to we're so glad you're here. Why are you coming back? Or why do you choose to go somewhere else?
I'll wait for the comments. Right?
Okay, well, why don't you start?
Okay. So I think definitely in this in the priority part of this, this one, right? I think the green ones, I like it actually. Definitely the first one, I would like to get that, right? That approach definitely, personally, I support that. Right. And I'm not sure about this exit interview part of it. It's good if you're not, and what kind of, we need to have some actions based on that, right? Otherwise, it will be just a database. That's it. I think we need definitely interview helps, but we need to have some action plan around that. If any negative or if any improvements is suggested. After school programming, you said that, or you mentioned that you are working on it and like to get some updates some point of time. So, and the last one, I know that I think Aaron will not be happy with this, but since I know we changed the board policy on that, but I don't know whether if any scope for relooking into about the private part, some point of time, the private school movement. So, what was the probably even I would have voted for that, but what was the intention behind that we will give the lower priority for the private students to come in?
So the reasoning behind that was to our families that are currently attending our schools, living in our attendance area, are attending, getting a priority to go into the school of choice and open enrollment. Our families that are choosing not to be enrolled in our schools and instead sitting out, we felt like it was a way to honor our families that are committed to our schools, attending their home schools, their neighborhood school, and are willing to wait to get into their choice of an overflow school versus our families that are saying, if I don't get the school I want, I'm going somewhere else. So it was just a way to prioritize there. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the conversation may have started at one of the task force
I think it
meetings.
did, yeah.
So I think it was one of the
Yeah,
four
there-
recommendations actually that came out of the task force work that we approved, that the board approved
Yeah, I would
last year.
leave this to my colleagues also, but I would like to hear from them.
Yeah.
If needed, we need to relook into that. That's my request. Okay,
And
that's
I-
it.
And I think the task force feeling on that was, and what all of these individuals are Cupertino Union School District, most of them, the majority are Cupertino Union School District acting parents, right? They're active, their kids are here and they feel that, we've invested in coming to your district and others have just invested in going through the procedure of enrolling, but really only, like Stacy said, choosing to go here if they get the one school that they want. And we're invested. We're active community members. We're active at the school site level. And they felt that private school if you're choosing to wait in a queue somewhere else, that's okay. You still have the ability to be on the open enrollment wait list, but our active families with kids in our seats would have a higher opportunity.
And just to, this applies to all open enrollment, not just middle school.
No, got it. Yeah, understood. Yeah. That's fine. And, so thank you.
So if, just to piggyback a little bit on the tail end of that conversation, if I recall correctly, when we made the decision, it was also based on what the task force was saying, was they didn't want to lose those families to private school. And so the idea at the time, if I recall correctly, was these families have already decided to do private, but these families are willing to wait. So let's try to get them to the school of their choice before they decide to leave for private school as well. I would be in, I mean, I feel like it's only been a year or not even, but yeah, like a year.
Mhm.
I don't know how much data it'd be. I would be interested in exploring it as well.
Yeah.
And seeing what the differences are, but I feel like we don't have enough data yet because it just happened in 2023.
Right.
But I'm also trying not to go into discussion mode right now. Since we're in info session, very info.
Right.
So I will support like exploring, just like figuring out getting some more data on that would be good for me. In terms of my other comments for slide 12, the alternative or magnet program in a small middle school, I am interested in, but I also have concerns about because I know that whenever we have an alternative school, we end up cannibalizing, right, from our neighborhood schools. And so it ends up just shifting the problem, not really solving the problem.
Whereas a magnet would be a little bit different than that because magnet could serve, we've never written policy around magnet schools, so we need to get some support with that.
Yeah.
But magnet can serve the neighborhood community first.
Uh-huh.
And then additional openings would be filled by others through an open enrollment process.
Yeah.
Is what I understand it to be.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to find something that would be compelling enough for other people to say, oh, I want to join that school community that's already formed. And so it would be an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would, yeah.
I would be in support of having the task force look at that a little bit more and explore a little bit more with that. I wonder in terms of tying it to that 5th grade exit interview, like Satish was saying, things have to be actionable, right? Like what are we going to do with the data that we're collecting? And so maybe part of that exit interview isn't so much like why are you leaving, but like what are the things. Maybe it's not an exit interview, maybe it's just a general survey of like, what are the things? Like, is it a drama school? Is it a music school? Is it a, whatever it might be? Because my general sense of why people leave for public or for private schools, you can ask 10 different people and it's 10 different reasons. Right. And so if we're constantly trying to chase the 1 or 2 or 3 for the different reasons, and it'll be everything from it's way too competitive and rigorous to it's not competitive and rigorous enough. And so, and we know this from like, conversations and data over the years. And so I guess I'm hesitant to build a strategy around trying to chase the families, because at the end of the day, those are personal decisions. But I do like the idea of maybe gathering data that might be that where there could be offerings that are more appealing that maybe we haven't thought about in the past. So I guess I would tie those two together.
I think Erin, a year and a half or 2 years ago, did a survey where we were talking about focus areas for school. And just like you're saying, it was all over the board. It was just, I mean, it was from arts to, mechanical engineering to, I mean, it was just to a language focus, and there wasn't really a strong common thread of anything. Yeah.
That was actually the survey that we had done through the task force a year and a half ago.
Okay. It was a year. Okay. Okay.
I would love to add the McAuliffe Middle School numbers to that list. I think as we're looking at, especially as we're looking at that data of how many kids are actually at the middle school in McAuliffe, and if those students ended up, if some changes were made there, I don't know what those are, I'm not going to say, but if there's some opportunities to explore different options with McAuliffe and really like what is the desire for students to stay there? What percentage are actually staying, and is it sustainable?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think those are it for me.
All right, thanks, Long.
Thank you for the presentation, and yeah, I still remember and thank you for having those yeah, it's so great to see so many some familiar faces. Yeah, I still remember. So we have yeah, some intense discussion and great ideas exchanged during the enrollment meetings, the enrollment task force meetings, and yeah, that's really a lot of great ideas generated. And yeah, I have two comments, and one thing that say I remember we had some idea about flexible boundary, and those getting.
So flexible boundary was one of them when we were discussing the elementary schools.
Okay, I
That
see.
wasn't something that has risen up as an interest right now with the eighth grade balancing enrollment.
Although it was one of the ideas that a table group came up with, that they didn't have a chance to explain what it would look like. So that might come back at the next meeting. Flexible boundaries was something that they wondered about, but they haven't had a chance to explain what they were thinking or to talk as a group about that.
Okay, cool. And so yeah, another thing that say like Sylvia said, and my colleague, yeah, they have an open enrollment, and I can see they probably the most active schools, because I received a mailer from them. Okay. Yeah, and yeah, so it's many board members yeah here, and so yeah, I would like to say know more about them and to say yeah, how they okay, so yeah, so what kind of condition are they in, and so what's driving them to be the most active open enrollment schools?
Yeah, oh, okay, all right, sorry.
Okay,
Thanks.
Okay,
Ava, please.
Okay, thank you. This might be a rhetorical question, and I will go with the statement if you don't mind. Regarding McAuliffe, one of the priorities there, we're still on the slide, which is great. The first one, alternative for magnet program, a small middle school. Isn't McAuliffe an alternative smaller middle school already that we have existing?
It's an alternative program that has a middle school component. Yes.
So is the idea for here for the balancing enrollment, are they seeking to have a different alternative program other than McAuliffe?
My belief based on the McAuliffe numbers, because McAuliffe does have the ability to grow. We've fluctuated between 2 or 3 middle school teachers over the course of the years based on the push through of students. And so I don't believe, but we haven't discussed it. I don't believe they were looking at McAuliffe as one of those, because McAuliffe came up as a separate item. So I think they were looking at it at whether or not an alternative program or a magnet program at a small middle school would help us with balance. So one of the ideas that was, well, what if we put a FARIA type program? What would that look like in a middle school? And if you put a FARIA type program on the Kennedy campus, on the Hyde campus, would that help us in some way, shape, or form balance? If you did a magnet program, I think you have the ability to control where you balance from.
Okay, so I have I guess this came out when you were explaining about magnet program. To Sylvia, you mentioned that magnet can serve the neighborhood community and others throughout the open enrollment process. And that's within our school district or open enrollment with kids outside of district because it's a magnet program? I'm sorry, not very clear on magnet programs.
No, and I am not an expert on it either. I believe you can, I do believe there are magnet programs that allow out-of-district families to come in. And-
There are two different types of magnet schools you could look at. One could be allowing out of district, which currently we are very limited in what we allow out of district for our inter-districts. We do restrict that because we're no longer an LCFF district, we're a basic aid district. And so we really do have to do that cost analysis when we're allowing students in.
So in order to make it work, it would be a magnet program within the Cupertino Union School District boundaries at a small middle school where potentially you hold sacred the kids that would live in those boundaries. Let's say it was Hyde Kennedy, because those are our smallest. And then based on the capacity for growth or the need for balancing, you could take kids from other schools through open enrollment. We'd have to really, as a district, because we've never done magnet, and I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think any of us are really experts in magnet programs. We'd have to do a lot of research into that, but that's, it's possible. Craig Baker, when he was here, it was one of the things that we were discussing in regards to the elementary school program. And he had a lot of background knowledge on how magnet programs worked and what the legalese around it were.
Okay, thank you. I think with the, I like hearing, and my understanding of the committee is that there haven't really had a chance to have a discussion regarding these topics.
Correct.
Even they've kind of prioritized and they ran out of time, which is good. That means they have great discussions going on and engagement. And that there may be some more topics that they weren't get around to. So I definitely be looking forward to hearing the more ideas they may have and reprioritizing. I like the idea of the alternative magnet program. The 5th grade exit interviews as well, and the after school programming at middle schools, which would give our families more opportunity of having the kids after school. So it'll be kind of like dawn to dusk kind of deal, but that we have in Alfred at the elementary schools to be able to have it at middle schools. I do want to do a +1 to the McAuliffe Middle School numbers with Sylvia, but also McAuliffe as a whole. I'm not sure if where this would fall within our district, explaining on, or not explaining, but like exploring on McAuliffe as a whole as a school. I did receive a lovely postcard, I think Long mentioned that, for promoting McAuliffe. But looking at not just the middle school numbers, but looking at the elementary numbers to see where we can go in terms of maybe the idea of the Fourier type programs or what our community wants. And I don't know how that would look like. But yeah, thank you.
All right. For me, I think just building on what I've heard here, I don't really, not here to really express a preference for these programs, but just some sort of maybe higher level thoughts, right? So I think the exercise we're embarked upon here is to, we have, peaks and valleys in our enrollment through the district. And so what we're trying to do is incentivize parents and students to take action, to perhaps take a, not go to private school or go to some other place. So we're trying to, incentivize people to do something other than what inertia would normally take them to do, right? And so we have a number of ideas here to attract folks, but I think what hasn't been really explicitly talked about is the impressions. What do people feel about what's the, what people think of certain school, their school, some other school. And I think having a better understanding of that will help us provide guidance of where to start working from. It's sort of like diagnosing a patient. I think a lot of times I see a lot of this, people make decisions based on what they see on WeChat and not necessarily what's reality. And I think understanding what that WeChat, quote unquote, and really social media kind of impressions, I think will help inform us on, what we need to address and just what we're working from. So that's sort of one thought. The other thought is, really what drives a lot of these are really demographic trends that we're not really going to be able to really influence a lot. Now, if you look at the numbers that are going back and forth, it's a percentage. We're not going to move like 300 students from school A to school B. What we're really talking about is really touching a couple of percent and making differences there, right? So I remember when we did the elementary schools, when you guys came back, it was a set of recommendations that addressed specific points. It wasn't, right? So I think even though this is sort of the balancing enrollment thing we're working on, I suspect what it's going to come down to is decomposing it to specific problems, right? Like between the boundary between school A and school B. And so I would encourage the committee to think at that level potentially, or at least consider that, rather than having, here's the magic pill that solves a problem, is because what works down at the south may be different than what works at the north. And so I think that'll help us get to more tractable solutions than something that covers everything. And then related to that then is then having the data, because if you're going to say, well, I'm going to be able to address this, that makes it a lot more tractable to get data. I heard a lot of discussions about wanting to understand what the community thinks. We're obviously not going to have the time, but really to do the surveys. But what I was thinking about is perhaps going out to the PTAs or the, we have the advisory, because I think folks who generally volunteer and the folks who kind of for either helping out at the schools or serve on these committees generally have a better sense of what the feeling is than the average parent. So that might be a potential channel, a sort of a low cost way of getting some data. But really, it's really about, for me, and then I always come back to sort of what's the success metric, and that's a lot easier to define once you define the specific problems. So just a couple of high level thoughts.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else from anyone?
I forgot to address, thank you.
Please.
To address the part about the priority of the enrollment task force that we had, let me go find that. On slide 12 about prioritizing our current CUSD students over the private.
For private,
Yeah, I think it was 12, was it?
that's backwards.
Exit data? No, enter data. Maybe it was slide 11.
It's this data. It's the kids that are.
The wait list of students sitting in private school.
Oh,
the wait.
sitting in private school. Oh,
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, slide 5.
Mhm.
To me, it makes sense that we want to prioritize and not lose our current families by giving them a priority. And I think I agree. I think it's a little too early because it's been less than a year which we implement to really have the data and see the effect of it. I'd like to kind of just sit on it and see how it goes.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see because remember these open enrollment wait list numbers, some of these families may actually be on here 1, 2, or 3 years. So when they do the new lottery, all of these families go away, they have to reapply. So it will be interesting to see how the data changes.
Thanks for
Because
reminding.
we may have much smaller numbers because no one is just sitting there for consecutive years anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is really good reminder that this is the
last year.
last
the last year of the latest, the grandfathers, so
Correct.
that going forth the next year, it will be fresh data every year.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it would be very interesting to see
To see the difference.
how it goes and how
Yeah.
things are changing. But really appreciate the community coming out and being part of the enrollment group. And Long has been in there and saying, hey, I missed that group. They had great people. So and we have great people leading it. So thank you very much.
I think the exciting part or nice part is that we have a meeting next week and we'll be able to come back in that first meeting in February and give you an update while everything is still really fresh in your mind. Sometimes it feels like it's many weeks
Yeah.
before we have our meeting. So there is a little bit of consistency there.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Leslie.
No? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks very much, Leslie. All right. 7.2, update on California school dashboard. Awesome.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Chris to come up. He's going to take the lead. This is a component that we share with you each year as part of our planning for LCAP. And so Chris will take us through the slides.
Welcome, Chris.
All right, good evening, Board of Trustees, Executive Cabinet. I'm here tonight to share with you the results and overview of our 23-24 California School Dashboard. The California School Dashboard is released publicly each December. The results are reviewed by our leadership and site principals to be included in our LCAP and our SIPSA plans. The California School Dashboard serves as an accountability tool to measure the effectiveness of the state of California's local control funding formula, and also to ensure that school districts are engaging in an annual cycle of continuous improvement. Results are published on the California School Dashboard, which inform the goals and the strategies in our district's LCAP. The state has 11 indicators, 6 state indicators that are collected and generate a color on the California School Dashboard, and 5 local indicators which are collected and self-reported by the district. The 2 state indicators of graduation rate and college and career readiness are specific to high school and unified school districts and are not applicable to us here in Cupertino. Two new additions were added to the California School Dashboard this year. The science indicator was added for informational purposes. No performance color was given this year. Next year will be the first year where science will generate a color and be included for accountability. Additionally, the state added another student group to be reported for each indicator. The long-term English learner group is a subgroup of the total English learners. They are English learners that have been designated as EL for 7 or more years. Here you will see a screenshot of our district dashboard. You can access this by going to caschooldashboard.org. This is an overview of the state and local indicators for our district. State indicators are given a color, and local indicators are either standard met or standard not met. If you were to look up the dashboard for a specific school site, you would only see state indicators because the local indicators are collected and reported at the district level only. Additionally, there are more reporting options that you can view by clicking the button at the top right of this screen. So in order to generate a color, each state indicator has its own 5x5 table. Along the left-hand side is the status or the performance level related to that indicator. These could be points or percentages based on how the results are reported. Categories range from very high to very low. Along the top, you will see the change from the previous year. Categories range from decline significantly to increase significantly. Based on both the status and change metrics, districts and schools will find themselves in a specific box with the associated color. All of these 5x5 tables can be found on the CDE website. We will start with our district's academic indicators. These results are based off of our 3rd through 8th grade students' performance on the Smarter Balanced assessments in the spring of 2024. In English Language Arts, we remained in the blue, the highest level. Our status is 86.1 points above standard, and the change from the previous year was negligible, 0.2 of a point. In math, similarly, we remained in the blue at 100.3 points above standard, with a change of 0.3 of a point. In science, there is no color in the first year, but we were 11.1 points above standard, with a change of 0.4 a point from the previous year. For clarity, the distance from standard is determined by averaging each student's specific distance from standard score on that particular assessment. In this example, you will see the student took the Math Smarter Balanced assessment. They received a scale score of 2505. The lowest possible scale score in the standard MET range is 2528. So this student is considered -23 or 23 points below standard. Another student may have scored 100 points above standard or +100. Those two distances from standard scores would be averaged together to get the overall distance from standard for that group. This methodology is applied to all students tested to determine our overall distance from standard score, which you see reported on our academic indicators. In our English language arts indicator, you'll see on what they refer to as the baseball card on the left-hand side. The bottom of each indicator, you will see the equity report. This is the distribution of student groups and the color that each of those groups achieved. At initial glance, you will see that for English language arts, we had 0 groups in the red, 3 in the orange, 1 in yellow, 2 in green, and 5 in blue. If you click where it says view more details, it opens up to show you which groups fall into the colors. This is because for each indicator, there may be groups that received no performance color. This is because this group did not meet group size threshold of 30 students. The exception to this rule are homeless and foster youth groups, which only need 11 students to generate a color. You'll see in our math distribution, we had 0 students in the red group, 3 students in the orange, 1 in the yellow, 3 student groups in green, and 4 student groups in blue. When looking at both English language arts and math, you will see that our Hispanic, homeless, and students with disability groups scored in the orange range. These groups continue to be prioritized with additional supports and monitoring. The next indicator is the English Learner Progress Indicator. The English Progress Indicator comes from the results of our English learners who took the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California, also known as the LPAC. This indicator shows the percentage of students who grew 1 English Learner Progress Indicator level, or LP level. The key at the top shows how the LPAC levels compare with LP levels. There are more LP levels than LPAC levels, allowing more students to demonstrate making progress on this indicator. As a district, we scored in the blue level with 65.5% of our English learners progressing 1 LP level, and the change was 1 4/10% drop from the previous year, which the state recognizes as maintaining, not declining. The only group within the English learner group is the long-term English learner group, and they scored in the yellow range at 65.3%, declining 14% from the previous year. The next indicator is our chronic absenteeism indicator. This reports the percentage of students that missed 10% of enrolled instructional days, requiring a minimum of 31 instructional days to be included in this indicator. These absences are inclusive of excused and unexcused absences. As a district, we scored in the green with 6.7% of our students who were identified as chronically absent. This drop of 1 2/10% is actually a positive drop. Chronic absenteeism and suspension rate are 2 indicators where declining is a positive. The equity report shows that of the student groups, 2 were in orange, 5 were in yellow, and 5 were in green. This last indicator is our suspension rate indicator. This reports the percentage of students who were suspended at least 1 day. These suspensions are inclusive of both in-school and out-of-school suspension. Students are not counted more than once. A student that is suspended 1 time and a student with multiple suspensions are counted the same. As a district, we scored in the green with 0.7% of students suspended at least 1 day. This is a change of 0.1%, meaning we maintain status. The equity report shows that of the student groups, 1 was in the red, 5 were in orange, 1 were in yellow, 3 were in green, and 2 were in blue.
So as Chris mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this is an annual report and an annual process. So we analyze the data at the district level as well as at the school site level. Principals are using this information in their SIPSAs. You will see it referenced as we go forward in our LCAP. You know, really throughout those processes, all throughout the year, we're monitoring how the kids are doing. Of course, keeping those district priorities in mind. We want all of our kids to be successful. We want all of them to thrive. And we are applying lots of different strategies to make sure kids can get what they need, both academically, but also in the realm of feeling a sense of belonging and feeling confident as they grow. So you will hear us continue to reference this as we go into the LCAP season. And we will incorporate the new dashboard results into next year's plan as we're making decisions about where to put resources. So we look forward to continuing to use this information and answering any questions that you may have.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Allison. All right, questions, Satish, would you do the honors?
No, I think not a lot of questions because it's pretty straightforward. Only one question I have is on this long-term English learners, right? So which you are saying that that's one area. So anything specifically we are planning to do better on that area?
Yes, one of our other directors, Sarah, in my department, she oversees support for English learners. And so she's been working with the principals at the middle school since it's 7 years, or more, to take a look at our students one by one and really understand, the reasons behind why they haven't reclassified yet. And so really it's a case by case kind of situation. Sometimes there's overlap between students in this group and students who have IEPs. And so, sometimes we kind of have to sort out what kind of support we want to put in, as part of the IEP process and which part is language development. And so that's a component that sometimes gets looked at. We, of course, have our support classes for English learners at middle school. So we have those resources as well. And Sarah's working with the principals to look one by one at our specific list of students so we can have an action plan that's personalized for each child.
Okay. Yeah, I hope we will do better there in the next one. Okay. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks.
So just with the ELs, when they are increasing to the next LP level, is that the same as getting reclassed?
No.
Okay.
So reclassification, they have to score a 4 on the LPAC, and that's the first criteria. And then there are additional criteria that we have locally where they have to demonstrate proficiency on our local assessments, in addition with teacher recommendation. And that's how a student is reclassified. So a student has to actually progress through all of the LP levels to even be eligible for reclassification.
I see. But then the 65% making progress is not then evaluating the reclassification. It's evaluating the progress they're making within from August.
So the bottom of that line, where it says 1, 2 low, 2 high, 3 low, 3 high, and 4, it's basically a movement from one to the next one, or maybe they might move up 2, but each student is counted once if they've made progress. And that's where that percentage comes from. They've made one step in their LP level.
Okay.
We do report on the reclassification rate as part of the LCAP annually. So we have both.
And then the 7-year long-term then is irregardless of the progress they're making within the LP, it's just that they haven't been reclassified for those 7 years.
Correct. So they're likely somewhere in one of those LP levels still.
Okay.
Or their LPAC levels. If they achieve a 4 on the LPAC, then that triggers the next process in reclassification. So if they were to have received that 4 and met all the additional criteria, they would no longer be a long-term English learner because they would be reclassified.
Right.
So they're likely still in probably that 2 to 3 range, depending upon how many times they've taken the LPAC assessment.
And they take that once a year?
Once a year, annually in the spring.
Okay. And do we know right now how many of those students we have?
LTELs?
of more long-term ELs?
Yeah, so reported on the dashboard last year, we had 130 long-term English learners that tested. Currently, I looked at the data this morning and that we have 90.
Okay.
So 90 students who are identified as a long-term English learner.
Haven't reclassified after
Who
7
have not
years.
reclassified after being in US schools.
Yeah.
As identified as an English learner
Okay.
for 7 years,
Oh,
7
wow.
or more years.
And then, because I know that this is new this year, right? So we don't know what groups they're coming from yet, or do you have that data?
What do you mean by
The
which
student,
groups?
the equity report, the groups that they come from. The
Like Hispanic or
Yeah.
each of those.
Oh, they don't disaggregate, at least on the dashboard, they don't disaggregate which of the ethnic groups
Okay.
most of our LTELs are coming from.
Okay.
But that is something that as they're looking at, Sarah is working with the sites, they're really disaggregating that data to identify who those students are and ask some of those deep probing questions about why, what is holding the student back from being able to reclassify. And so I think we're going to hopefully see significant improvement, because this is another opportunity where a light is being shined on an area where we need additional support.
Okay. My other question is about chronic absenteeism. And so I know this is something we talked about last year as well. And it was something that came up as a challenge for us. So it's great to see that the number has declined. Did any of the strategies that we did this past year to try to make that happen? Like what was effective? Like how did this progress get made?
It's hard to pinpoint exactly, what works in these kinds of situations, but we did increase messaging. We also eliminated independent study a couple of years back. And also Amy and Carrie have been working with all the sites to help people, help the principals and their leadership teams at the site have a process for monitoring over the course of the year and have a process for working with families. Within our own internal data system, we can see which students are at risk of becoming chronically absent, which students already are. And so, just a little more proactive work at the school sites as well, I think is showing some, positive impacts. Everybody's been working really hard to keep a close eye on things and communicate with families and, work as a team. So we appreciate that.
And I'll add to that, I think when you look at chronic absenteeism, oftentimes you're looking at it through either two lenses. Is it an educational need or is it an unmet need that really needs to be addressed? And having principals be able to find those students using our internal data systems, and because it's letting them know who is at risk before they actually get to the 10%, so that they can intervene early. So I think a lot of that also has been brought more to the forefront for our principals with annual regular cadence of running those reports, identifying who those students are, and then sitting down and having those one-on-one meetings with families.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Lo.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. And say for in the equity report, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what does that mean? Is that one people or one student we're talking about? Or
So
how many?
like, for example, at the bottom of this report where it says 2, that's representing 2 student groups.
Oh,
So that you'll see that on the orange indicator, those 2 student groups are the American Indian and homeless group, which are in the orange category.
Okay, so
5 translates to the yellow, and those are the 5 groups. So those numbers really are saying you have groups that you need to pay attention to, especially if they're in the red or the orange or the yellow.
okay, so it doesn't necessarily translate to how many students.
So depending upon the size of the group,
Yeah,
it could be very small. It could be some of our largest groups.
Yeah.
So for example, like our homeless population is a very small population, but they meet the criteria, the actual number, 11 or more. So in the case of, say, chronic absenteeism, we have groups as large as 9,800, which is our Asian group, have groups as small as our homeless group, which is 33 students. So that number doesn't necessarily represent the number of students. just represents the number of groups that have been identified in that color band.
Okay, I see.
So it's looking at, so in an academic area, for example, when Chris was explaining distance from standard, how it was all average. So we have the all in the blue, but then the distance from standard is being calculated for each group too. So some students in these groups, are doing really well or are not chronically absent, but the collective distance from standard is lower than the all. And so it tells us that we need to make sure we're directing resources in that area. So that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question on page 6.
Which one is 6?
Yeah, let me see.
Academic indicators,
okay,
ELA, math,
yes.
science.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
So yes, yeah, academic indicator. So yeah, what is the full points, the total points for each area?
So where it says 86.1 points, is that?
No, I mean, say what is the total points? Like I assumed that it was 100, but then but not the math. We are 100 points
okay.
above standard.
high?
So
Right.
How
So it depends upon the grade level. There's a scale score range. So for each grade level, there's a scale score range. I can't remember off the top of my head where the beginning and the end is, but within that range are the 4 bands. So standard met and standard exceeded are the top 2, and then standard nearly met and standard not met are the bottom 2. And so you'll see, like, for example, in this here, the range for standard met starts at 2528 and it goes all the way up to 2578. 2579 is the first scale score in the standard exceeded range. So that would keep going beyond that. But I don't have the actual end of the scale score range.
We could put some information in the board update. I think you might be asking how high could it go? So we were 100.3 above. What would be the maximum points above standard that would be possible? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So we can research.
So
that.
from this one, it looks like it's more than 2,000, 2,500, right?
Right. So I'll need to find out what the highest scale score and subtract it from 2528, and that will tell you what's the highest. If every kid got a perfect score, that's where we would be.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thanks. Ava?
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, so my question, I think it's on the chronically absenteeism. I wonder if having one of the efforts from the answers that I think Sylvia was asking about what strategies were effective, was at least, I'm not sure if there's the parent involvement specialist at the school sites, was that a factor as well?
Do you mean the parent liaisons?
Or parent liaisons? Yes.
I'm sure our sites have access parent liaisons for different aspects of this. We have 5, across the sites, 2 support primarily at our sites receiving the Title I funds, but all of them support all sites. So principals have a list that they can access of parent liaisons because we have diversity of languages across the group.
Yes.
So sometimes, it can be just even simple things like making sure that somebody can help a parent, sign up for Parent Square, things like that. Extra help, parent to parent help is definitely a strategy that we use.
I think, and part of that is each of the sites are diving in and looking at their own data. They will begin to identify what they believe were some of the influences for those, because some of the schools rose and decreased in chronic absenteeism, some of them increased, so they're taking a look at within their own, because they know what each strategy were, because each school may have done something different as they identified their need as well. So that's kind of the work that's going on right now at the sites, is they're diving into that to look as well.
You'll see it in their SIPSAs coming soon.
Maybe tomorrow morning. Okay. So I guess the follow-up question, and I like how Chris addressed this in the beginning, saying that it's kind of restrictive of how much the breakdown can go down on the dashboard. I wonder, as a district with the internal data, and then that the principals could see like the breakdown, for instance, of the ethnic subgroups for Asian. I mean, we do live in a pretty dominant majority or somewhat close to majority and a variety of Asian population that we live in. Want to make sure that I know that under Asians, we are in blue or green and in some of these, but I wonder if disaggregated from the large umbrella of Asian within the different ethnicities, if there might be some students that may fall through the cracks. And I remember like we kind of talked about that last year as well.
It isn't, as you mentioned, broken out that way on the
Right.
dashboard, but I think we provided some update in the recent board news about that, and we can circle back with principals on that information as well.
Thank you.
Anything else, Eva?
Oh, no, that's the questions I have. Thank you.
Oh, great, thanks. Mine, let's see, so on the dashboard, there's a set on your slides, I think slide 4, where we show the dashboard, there's a set that says district only local indicator standards met. Is that really it's either met or not met?
Yeah, it's so in all of those areas, we get standard met if Allison does her homework.
Okay.
Basically, this is a locally collected data collection, and she writes the narratives that goes along with each one of those. So as long as she submits it to the state, you get a standard met.
Oh.
And so we take the data locally, of course, and it informs our LCAP plan. And you'll see where survey data, parent and family engagement data, climate survey data, those things show up in our LCAP with goals and strategies, but they're not actually reporting that because each district has their own local processes for that.
Got it, okay. And then when I click through to the individual schools, science doesn't have a color. Is that just for this year, or they just don't give science colors, or?
So science, this is the first year that science is being reported, and it's only being reported for informational purposes.
But the intent then in the future, that'll be one of the tracked ones?
So next year, it will be a third academic indicator along with language arts and math that will generate a color.
I see, okay.
And I could add as well, just as a reminder, the standards changed for science. So, what we're measuring the students on, next generation science standards, and our curriculum changed to update that. So, we're in a process of that update for the students in the testing group. So we were above standard, not as high as the other areas, but that would be expected when the learning standards and the curriculum have changed, and we're on that process of making the transition.
It makes sense.
And again, we're sharing dashboard data with you, but previously we came to you with CASP data. The academic data that's on the dashboard comes directly from that same data that we shared with you a few months ago. And if you recall, our science data continues to go up every year. We're really proud of the work that's happening in with science in particular. And so it will become another indicator that is represented with a color next year.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And then maybe related to the point that Ava brought up in terms of the different groups, I guess these are defined by the state, because I see Filipino, for instance, is broken out separately. That's just because the states decided to do it that way. So we just use what they have.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, those are my questions. Thank you. Anybody else have anything else?
I have one actually.
Please.
Now that I understand that these ones that are standard met are just our own local indicators. So let me just make sure I understand. So every district can decide what kind of report they want to put in as a local indicator, and it's not like, there's not a consistency. So we could choose to put in some other reports as well, or?
Well, there are requirements for each of the local indicators. You might remember in the spring, I usually bring those. It's one of the requirements for LCAP, the local indicator reports. And so each of the local indicators, there are choices and requirements. So there's a consistent frame, but then we choose, how we're gathering that. So, we do our district parent LCAP survey as part of parent and family engagement, for example, but we design it to meet the requirements of the state local indicator as well as things that we want to know. So there's flexibility, but it is the same reporting requirements are true for all districts, but there is some local choice in how we
I
go
see.
about it.
Kind of like, there's like a list of things that we could choose to pick
Basically.
from, and then.
Yes, or
report.
prompts that we need to respond to.
I see. Okay. Because I got excited for a second because I thought, oh, maybe we can put the disaggregated data as part of that local indicator, because I know that would be something interesting for, like very much in favor of disaggregating that data, because when we talk about Asian students in our community, that could mean so many different things.
We can include that in our LCAP narrative in the spring as well. There's that overview section and the analysis, so I can make a note to remember that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Do we have any public comments?
No, we do not.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Chris. Oh,
Do we have comments? I thought we were separating questions and.
oh, I'm
comments.
sorry. Yes,
Sorry.
okay, let's do comments. My bad. We'll go around. Satish, anything?
No, I think I have given my comment on it.
All right.
Thank you.
I gave mine.
Long?
Yes, just like the comment before, and so if we have any anything, say if we took some action and make improvements, and it would be nice to point it out, and what the board can help, and any suggestions for the board action, and so that also would be great to see those.
Thanks. And Ava, thanks for the reminder.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I just want to keep within our boundaries of questions and comments. Thank you. I go back. So slides 8 and 9, I like how this time we're showing how it's broken down in groups. I think it just doesn't look the same as it did last year in terms of like how it's viewed. So I appreciate the extra time of going there. Looking at specifically the suspensions, when I went to the not suspensions, the suspensions have been the same over the last 2019, 22, 23, and 24 years. However, looking at the chronic absenteeism by the years, I do see that 1.2% decrease from 7.9 to 6.7. So I appreciate also going deeper and looking at the trend and how it was. Do we happen to know, to try to help decrease the absenteeism from 2019 to 2022? We had the pandemic. I wonder if there's anything from that we can learn, because it went up from 2022 to 2023 by 0.9%, but like, I don't know what other things that we can look into to help decrease that absenteeism. And
do you want me to respond, or wasn't you?
Comment or question, I guess.
Okay. Yes, I mean, this is something that is occurring across the state and probably beyond the state, since the pandemic, more concerns around absenteeism. And Carrie and Amy on my team, they stay in touch with county resources as well as other, webinars, the research, and, really stay up to date on best practices and share those with the principals. And, I think, as Chris mentioned, it's really about understanding the story behind each student and each family, and then trying to assist with resources and plans. So I appreciate you. Thank you. Acknowledging that it's very complex.
Yes, and it sounds like what you all are currently doing is working, so I appreciate the effort. Making that one-to-one contact with the student and their family. I think that's really important, having the family support, and with Carrie, with providing the student services and community connection. I also want to say good appreciation on slide 10 on the English learner progress in terms of explaining the different levels of the LPAC and how that works in terms of understanding what are the long-term English learners. Let's see. I think I don't know if it's possible, kind of piggyback on Sylvia's suggestion of having our own local indicators, whether we've met the standards or not, but by having disaggregated data, specifically for the ethnicity of Asian, since we do, under that Asian umbrella, we do have a wide variety of students and community members, and making sure that the students' needs are met. I mean, I know retrospectively at each of the sites, the principals can meet with all the students who may be in that position, but I think that may be something interesting to kind of look at.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks. And I don't have anything. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Allison. Yeah, very informative report. Great results. Thanks. Okey doke. 7.3, sunshine proposal with CSCA contract agreement. Mike, this one's yours.
Thank you. I probably won't be as riveting and as exciting as Chris was, but
you can try.
Okay. So bringing this forward, just so you can look at it for your information. These are the articles that we are presenting to CSCA for reopeners, which is interesting because they presented the same exact as we did. That doesn't always happen. So we're kind of aligned there. And we'll be bringing it back in the future with theirs for approval.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any questions or comments from anyone on this one? No? Okay, any public comments on this?
No, they're not.
Great. All right, thanks. Then let's move on to item 7.4, 25 winter data collection. Who gets this one?
Chris will introduce, and then Tina's going to make her way up to the podium. And this is one of our annual reports that we.
Yeah, thank you. I'll introduce Tina Bernal, Director of Fiscal Services. She will review tonight the winter data collection. This is the annual process for which we need to report to the federal government as far as all of our federal funds. So I'll turn it over to Tina.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the time to talk tonight regarding some of our federal dollars that we receive. So just as a reminder, the winter consolidated application, as Chris mentioned, we fill it out 2 times a year. And the first question you might have is, what is CONAP and what is CARS? So I came to you last spring and I shared an update with you. It was one of the first updates that had been shared with the board. So now you get to see me 2 times a year. So you'll get updates 2 times a year. So basically the consolidated application is also called the CONAP. So sometimes you'll hear me use that reference term, just so you know what that is. But that's the tool that's used by the California Department of Education to distribute the categorical funds from various federal programs to county offices, school districts, and district-funded charter schools. So the CONAP is the way in which the federal government filters dollars down to us for our title funding. The Consolidated Application and Reporting System, also known as CARS, so you will also hear me use the acronym CARS, is the actual data collection system for which we apply for that funding and we report on the use of that funding. So I'm going to do just a quick overview of our title funding, just so that everyone has a base knowledge of the different types of title funding that we receive. So Title I funding, the basic purpose is to support effective evidence-based educational strategies that close the achievement gap and enable the students to meet the state's challenging academic standards. Title II is to provide supplemental activities that strengthen the quality and effectiveness of teachers, principals, and other school leaders. Title III English Learner Program is to ensure that all EL students attain English proficiency, develop high levels of academic attainment in English, and meet the same challenging state academic standards as all other students. Title III Immigrant Program is to pay for enhanced instructional opportunities for immigrant students and their families. And Title IV is to improve students' academic achievement by increasing local educational agencies, schools, and local communities' capacities. So you might ask, well, how does Cupertino use these title funds? What type of expenditures do you spend this money on? So the next slide just does a quick overview. This is not intended to be all inclusive. I just wanted to give you some ideas of some of the types of expenditures that are included. So in Title I, this specifically helps to serve our highest needs schools, which includes DeVargas and Nimitz. It helps cover things like hours for our library media clerks, special program coordinators. It also supports our homeless students. We also support reading intervention teachers and math intervention teachers. Those are some examples of types of things that we do with that money. You'll see in Title II, we've got a series of items there, Future Ready Learning Networks, ATSI funds for select schools, which are outlined in the federal addendum, our new hire institute, et cetera. Title III, math intervention teachers, English learner support, especially for those red sites on the dashboard, and English learner professional development and instructional materials for all ELs. Title III immigrant programs, some examples are Benchmark Hello and Imagine Learning, which are software programs to help support those particular students. And Title IV Overdrive, Parent Education, our Project Cornerstone program, and Stanford Parent Education. So those are just a sample of the types of expenditures that we have to support those programs. So now I get into the reporting. This is the report for the 22-23 year. It overviews how much we were allocated in each of the title funding. We received a total of 1.222 million, and the expenditures that we reported were 1.1 million. So I want to highlight the Title III immigrant money. If you'll remember, when I came back to you in the spring, I shared with you that there was a clerical error in the reporting of our UPP number, which is how the calculation is calculated for how we receive the immigrant money. So the UPP number was actually reported higher than it should have been. So they allocated more money to us than they should have. So we caught that right away. We let them know. So they withheld some money and then they still overpaid us a little bit. So we do have a balance of 93,000 that we do have to give back. That was not unspent money. It was just an error. They overpaid us. And so we're going to repay that money back. Then I'll move into the 23-24 reporting. So at this time, we only reported on Title I, Title III English Learner, and Title IV. You'll see the expenditures that were reported and the remaining balances that are left over. Title I allows us to carry over 15%, which we did. So that balance is 49,000. That has already been spent in the 24-25 year. So we're now caught up to date. And the Title III English Learner had 74,000, which is obviously, again, the first money that we spend in 24-25. So at this time, all that money has been spent, but as of reporting on this application, it had not been spent. Then the last part of the application, this winter application that we receive actually finalizes our money for the 24-25 year. So what happens is we come up with preliminary allocations. We try and do our best guess. And this is where right now the uncertainty with the federal government is creating a little bit of nervousness on how we predict these numbers for the future. But currently, right now, we do a projection on these numbers, and then we don't find out until December right now what our actual allocation is for the year. So we're already halfway through the year right now. So we're having to make some adjustments. If we receive a little bit more than anticipated or a little bit less than anticipated, we have to pivot. And Allison and I do that work with the directors and with the principals to make those adjustments once we find out what our allocation is. So for 24-25, you'll see we have an allocation of $885,000. The only other note I would like to make is that when we do apply for this money, we have what's called a reservation. It's basically a percentage of the funding that is set aside for a specific purpose. That would be our administrative costs or indirect costs, and also for that nonprofit private school equitable services. And so if you'll remember, we have students that reside in the Cupertino Union School District area, but then attend private schools. So we are required to set aside money to serve those children, and we will work with the private schools. If they are willing to provide those services, then we will provide them with the funding to ensure that those kids get those services. So the last slide outlines the two schools that currently we are collaborating with this year, specifically around Title II funding, and that's St. Simon Parish and St. Joseph. We do have other eligible schools that are currently not, we're currently not working with because they chose not to collaborate and utilize that money to serve those kids. So basically the next steps, I will be coming back to you in the spring with updates on where we're at with each of the titles, as well as our application for 25-26. And then next week, as we attend the governor's workshop, we'll continue to learn more about how funding assumptions might be, shifting with the federal funding. That's it for my presentation for tonight.
All right, thank you, Tina. Let's see if anybody have any questions or comments. Go ahead.
Satish, have any?
No, I don't have any comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just check with everyone.
So just real quick, the 885,000, that's the projection, right? We don't know yet.
No, that's
What
the
that-
number that we just got. So that is final. That's
Oh,
our
that is
final number
final.
for
Okay.
24-25. So I made projections when because we did the budget like last June, right?
Yeah.
So I made a projection at that time of how much I thought we were going to get.
Okay.
These are the actual numbers that
These are
we're
the
getting
actual
now.
numbers.
Mhm.
Okay, and this is not, because it's, it's quite a bit lower than the 1.2 from last year.
Mhm.
But it has nothing to do with the 93,000
Mm-mm.
that it's not like they're paying us less because we haven't paid that back.
No, you brought up a great point. So let me reiterate one point. So let me go back. So you'll see in 22-23, we had Title III immigrant money. That was the money that we did have the over on UPP. When we came out of the pandemic, this was the last kind of pot of money that we had carried over it's hard to spend. You have to be very, very diligent and very dedicated and have a very specific plan to be able to use this money. So it was harder for us as we were getting going. We were able to get a lot of the other stuff going a little bit quicker. This was kind of the last thing that we were kind of getting going. So what happened was for 23-24, you'll see the immigrant money says not reported at this time. We did not apply for immigrant money in 23-24 because we were still spending the previous pot of money. We were concerned that we would get behind and have to give the money back, and we didn't want to get in that situation. However, we are going to apply for that money in 25-26. We will be applying for that money in 25-26. And so you'll see the number go, well, hopefully, again, federal government will see the volatility and what happens, but you will see that pot of money resurface back in here, and hopefully then our number should go back up.
Okay. So as this number has gone down this year compared to last year, I guess this is part of the larger budget conversation about what exactly that's paying for and what might need to come out of a different bucket.
Yes, exactly. Those are all, as we develop budget assumptions, that's one of the key things. Allison and I spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, can this be covered by a title? Does this need to go to LCAP? And we do a lot of moving around. We just got done doing a lot of moving right now because we found out the final numbers and had to do some jiggling. So there is periodically those adjustments that have to be made, but that is part of the budget assumptions, is figuring out what's going to cover what.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Lo.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, following Sylvia's question, say if we applied more, then we can spend, and will we have any punishment or?
You would have to just give the money back. So if you applied for it, you would have to give the money back. But they will begin to start auditing you more and looking more in detail at your financials in the event that you kind of apply for more money than you're actually using. So it does create some red flags, but you can do it and you would just have to give the money back if you didn't use it.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I have another question. Say for 23 to 24, we have some of the allocation not reported at this time. And yeah, I was expecting, say, for current year, if we have something not reported, but why the previous year is?
So what I'm showing here is only what the federal government is requiring us to report. It does not mean that we don't have expenditures. We had expenditures. This report just didn't require those expenditures at this time. So the federal government is very interesting. There's certain funds, for example, Title I, there's a series of requirements that we report on. We actually report on it quarterly throughout the year. The Title II, for example, has no requirements. We only have to report on it at once every 2 years. So every funding source just has a little bit of different requirements. And so at this time, it's not that we don't have actual expenditures. It's just this is what was reported on the report that we had to submit. Does that make sense?
Okay, but we already reported 24 to 25 school year on.
Yeah, so you have a period of time to spend the money and then you can be allowed carryover. So right now we're reporting on 22, 23. So we're wrapping up 22, 23 and that one is now done. We're reporting on 23, 24 and giving an update on that. And we're reporting on 24, 25, what our plans are for this year. Then next year we'll have to say, okay, did you spend the money in 24? Right now, we're just saying, this is how much money we're receiving and this is our plan. It's like there's a delay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thanks. Ava?
Thank you. So Tina, going to slides 7 and 8, the last two slides, just a clarification question. Are you saying that some of the private schools, if they have students that could benefit from Title II funding, they chose not to collaborate?
That's correct. So we have a specific process that we follow. Allison and Miko actually reach out to each one of those private schools. They ask them to put together a plan to serve the students that are attending their school that reside in our service area. We ask for that plan to be submitted by a certain date. If they don't submit by that date, we do one reminder. If they don't submit by that date, then they've said that they don't want to participate. And so then from that point, we move forward.
So it's a choice on their part.
On their part, yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And then our duty and responsibility is to make sure that we're setting aside the money in the event that they do want to participate, that we are setting aside the money. And then we actually oversee the process of what services are they providing? Are they providing the adequate services and then reimbursing them for those costs? So that's the role that we fulfill.
Thank you for taking time to explain that. I know this is all federal funding and there's different reporting. With this year of $885,533, top of your head, what percentage of our budget actually come from federal funding? As I'm not sure, and we're not sure where our U.S. Department of Education is going to be at.
So right now, it's funny, as I was sitting listening to other presentations, I thought, I should probably know that number. So I actually looked it up. So in our budget this year, $5.3 million is federally funded. So we receive federal dollars through special education and many other programs. So this is part of it. This is about 800,000. So about 2% of our overall revenues, about 5.3 million, are federal dollars that we're currently receiving this year. And that will be one of, again, the topics that we'll be talking a lot about when we make budget assumptions for next year.
And that's inclusive of the specific Title I to Title IV.
Correct.
Okay. So 2% of our entire budget, which is about 5.3 million, are federally funded.
Tina, can I clarify? I'm actually looking at the book
Oh,
right now. So for federal revenues, total general fund, is,
Are you looking at budget or first interim?
I'm looking at budget, for actually first interim. 4.8 million out of the total budget. I think it's about 2%.
It's in the, yeah, it's in the,
It's in the pie graph.
revenue pie graph. Yeah, yeah, it's about 2%.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Those are the questions I have.
Okay, thanks. My question is really just about the process, this federal title funding application process. Is there a cap to what LEAs can get? Or is it just a matter of how many programs can you convince them to fund? How does that work?
Actually, it's all based on our enrollment.
Got it.
So
Okay,
it's like a per student dollar amount, and then it's based on, the different categories, Title I, et cetera. So it's just
So
a per student
once you
rate.
show a need, a program that addresses a need, then it's per head essentially.
Exactly.
Okay. All
Yep,
right.
bingo.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I didn't have anything else. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, and any public comments on this one?
No, we do not.
Okay, all right, well, thank you, Tina, for another informative presentation as always.
Thank you, Tina.
All right, let's see what's next. Quarterly report on the Williams uniform complaints. Who
No
cares?
presentation, just a quick report.
Okay,
Just our standard report, no complaints were filed during the period, and we bring these reports to the board quarterly for information.
right. Any questions or comments? No? Any public comments on this?
No, we do not.
Great, thank you. All right. Moving on to action. We have one action item tonight, 8.1. Looks like some IT products and services. So since it's an action, could I get a motion on this, please?
I'll move.
Thank you. And could I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. Mahmood, I presume you're the one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like we do it every year, we bring forward some of the USAC E-rate projects that we're going to be going forward with. And the ones that are over a bid limit, we would bring them over as an action item. So this is a cabling project that we're looking to do. We went out for 5 schools, but we ended up selecting 4 because of the costs that came back will put us over the match that USAC does for us. And we're a 40% match district. So it puts us over, and typically, hopefully every 5 years is a new cycle. We expect a new cycle will come up for us soon. So they should be announcing that. Actually, we're hoping that they announce that within the next month. So then during the next cycle, we'll go ahead and apply again for discounts for the remaining schools that we want to upgrade the cabling infrastructure for.
All right, thank you. Questions? I'll start with.
I have one question, Mahmood. It's good. Do you know when you compare the Stevens Peak alone, this ACC had given much lower quote versus IT management, right? Restal IT management is pretty low. Any reason why it is? Is it because of a specific site and how it is being done? Or I thought that the cable cost and everything should be very similar.
Yeah, it would be typically, and the reason why that one varies. So there's a couple of differences, but the biggest thing is Stevens Creek actually got recabled not too long ago, but the fiber needed to be replaced now. So that's one of the only sites that it's just fiber. So IT management came in really aggressive on the cabling, and if I was to guess, if there was more cabling involved and not just the fiber, we would have probably seen IT management come in, with that one as at a better cost too. But for just the fiber, ACC was able to come in at a better price.
And second question on this is, these are like our traditionally we have been using their help IT management and others, like this is like this company is new for us. Or?
No, we've used so ACC I have not worked with before. They're more of a Central Valley. IT management, we've used them for quite a bit for different projects. So IT management, EKC, AMS.net, those are bigger companies in the area. They tend to always respond or are interested in doing work with us. And we have done, and we've had a good relationship with IT management, even on recent projects.
And quite reliable. kind of quality perspective.
Yeah, we've been satisfied with their work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Sylvia.
I have the exact same 2 questions.
Okay, Long.
Yeah, I have one question. I noticed that item 9.9 is also about the E-rate, but it's in constant. And why this one is in action and another one is in constant?
Yeah, because that one is below the bid limit. So we don't need to necessarily bring in it as an action. It can come in as a consent. So in theory, I guess we could put them together and we can put them as action items, but it's not necessary. And as our regular practice that we like to follow is keeping things consistent. We put that one as its own separate item as a consent item.
And another question is that, can you educate me about what is category 1 and
yes, okay. So and yeah, actually we've had conversations about this in previous board meetings, but that's a great question. So I can give you a quick overview. So USAC is so the program under this E-rate program, it's an agency, or it's a program that runs to give schools and libraries discounts within that program, and it's for communication services typically, right? So it could be cabling, it could be connectivity between buildings, between school sites, internet access. So all those different services that are offered, they fall into currently 2 categories, and now there's going to be a 3rd category that they're piloting. But the current 2 categories that are in place now are category 1, which everybody qualifies for, and there's unlimited funds for that area at your same district discount. So we're a 40% district discount. Category 2 is you have a limit every 5 years of a certain amount of dollars that you can spend. And that's based on our student count at the beginning of those 5 years. And that dollar figure, once you spend it, it's gone. They don't match anything beyond that. So category 1 is for the bigger utility services. So things like our fiber connectivity between the school sites and the district office. That would be a category 1. That's something that everybody's entitled to, and it doesn't matter that the construction cost is whatever amount it is. They'll go ahead and match their 40%. Category 2 is more of the internal connectivity things. So for example, some switching equipment or internal cabling between classroom to classroom. That's where it would fit within, we have to fit it within that budget that we're allocated on a 5-year cycle.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Ava?
Yeah, a couple of my questions were answered by Satish. I do have a 3rd question. Is this money coming out from general fund? Like if they're covering 40%, the other 60%, I guess?
So as of right now, we would be budgeting it through the general fund, but ideally, we'd be able to use bond funds if approved towards these projects. And that's what, anything infrastructure, we'd like to use bond funds when we can. And these projects, by the way, keep in mind, these are forward-thinking projects. So we can't actually start this work until the next school year, or they let us start it into June. But typically it's the next cycle. So right now we're approving something that we'd be looking to start the work in June.
Okay, you answered my follow-up question to that, if we could use bond funds for that, but thank you. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering, are we in the middle of a refresh cycle for cables sources towards the end, or these 5 schools? Do they? I see a reference to next wave of waiting for the next wave of funds. I'm just wondering.
We are after these 5, we put 4 schools. We couldn't do the 5th, but after those schools are done, we're closer to about half done.
Okay.
So we still have a lot. However, those ones that are half done, and we had a board presentation a while back where we prioritized. I don't know if you remember this, priority 1, 2, 3 of set. So this is like the middle ones now, but now we still have half our schools, which we would ideally align it with construction work that happens at those sites.
Hopefully, yeah.
So for example, you don't see Kennedy on this list, but Kennedy does need recabling, but Kennedy may be a priority school for a lot of construction. So we would align it with work with the Kennedy site.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And what's the lifetime of these cables, or what's the useful service life?
Industry lifetime is quite a bit shorter than probably education lifetime. So our cabling here, you know, when I consider some of the ones that were done, they were done like 10 years ago and I'm considering them new, or when the last bond we're going, so a little over 10 years now.
Wow.
So, and I consider that still new. The fiber and the equipment that we run on these things, as of right now, they're still meeting the needs. So we feel like we're okay. So if we run into around, I think our cycle now is hitting probably a little over 15 years where the infrastructure has to be replaced. The switching equipment, we try to shrink that down to around 8 years.
Right. That's still pretty.
It's still long,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're going to compare it to the industry, but I think for education, we try to make things work as long as we can.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anything else?
Okay, I do have a follow-up question. So for those equipment, do we say measure it by time, or do we say only do something when there's something is broken?
Infrastructure like the cabling and things like that, those are the sooner. We know that when they're aged, we have to start replacing them, or we're patching or fixing, or we're limiting our equipment to run at slower speeds because our infrastructure is aged. So we have to replace those things, right? But we try to do those as we have funds. And again, we try to align it with bond funds when we can, because it really should be a infrastructure kind of project. The switching equipment, like for example, Wi-Fi, we would go ahead and cycle those, and Wi-Fi is our most critical tool that we use within our infrastructure tools that we use in classrooms and throughout the district. So we try to kind of bring that number down a little bit, but we're still never going to be, at the leading edge of technology, because I think our cycle has to be a little bit smaller because of funding reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Let's see. Do we have any public comments on this one, Aaron?
No, we do not.
Okay, let's go for a roll call vote then.
Trustee Zhao,
Aye.
Trustee Chow,
Hi.
Trustee Leon,
Aye.
Trustee Manhattan,
Aye.
Trustee Lu.
Aye. Okay, all right, motion passes. All right, let's moving on to consent. We have 12 consent items. Could I get a motion, please?
I'll move.
Thanks, Sylvia. And a second?
I second.
Thanks, so thanks, Long. Let's see. Okay, do we check for public comments? We don't for consent, right?
Typically on consent. No.
Okay, all right. You knew what this. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Zhao,
Aye.
Trustee Chow,
Aye.
Trustee Leon,
Aye.
Trustee Manhattan,
Aye.
Trustee Lu.
Aye. All right, okay. Thanks, everyone. Moving on to the 10.1 board activities and committee reports. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Yes. Last week I met with Chris and talked about budget and bond, and really learned a lot. Thank you.
All right, cool. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I think it was Tuesday night. I went to the Los Altos City Council meeting. They had an item that talked about the school crossing guards. And good to hear that, they were passing a resolution to move from hiring a third-party entity to manage the school crossing guards to bringing the management back to the city, which was a cost-effective method. And it didn't seem like they were changing the amount of school crossing guards, which I went to see and said some praises of the collaborative work that we've been doing on our 2x2. So it was, it seemed like it was very well received.
Do you want to talk about office hours?
You can do it since I already said something.
Okay, I'll wait my turn. Anybody else?
I attended the CLIPCO meeting a week ago. I went with Sarah Brown and the Miller principal to talk about, so they had some questions about how the transitions class was going to work with the CLIP students, because the CLIP students already have a second elective in 6th grade. And so there were a lot of questions about that. So I think it was a good conversation. It was a robust conversation.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, anyone else? Okay. So Ava and I held the community office hours on Monday. We had 2 people log in, neither of whom offer to ask no one asked any questions. So Ava and I talked about current events, future events, weather for about 15-20 minutes, and then they logged off, and then we hung out for another 10. So we might want to think about more better ways of outreach or something. Yeah, so but it's for the future. Okay, great, thanks. Item 11.1, agenda setting. Anyone have anything they'd like to suggest for a future board meeting agenda? Okay, well, it's only the beginning of the year, plenty of opportunities. And then, all right, then moving on to 12.1, do we have any public comments on closed session items?
No, we do not.
Doke. In that case, then I'm gonna adjourn us to a closed session at 8:48.